Welcome. Settle in. Get comfortable. Tonight, we're diving deep into the story of one of the most explosive personalities ever to grace the arenas of Clash Royale. Pull your blankets close, dim those lights, and let me tell you about a warrior who traded precision for power, who found beauty in chaos, who discovered that sometimes the loudest statement you can make is through the thunderous boom of a rocket-propelled firework splitting the sky. This is the story of the Firecracker. The year was 2020, and the world of Clash Royale was about to change forever. It was early February, specifically the third day of that cold winter month, when something new arrived in the arena. The timing wasn't accidental. Chinese New Year celebrations were filling the air with the scent of gunpowder and the brilliant cascades of fireworks painting the night sky in every color imaginable. It was against this backdrop of celebration and explosive artistry that the Firecracker made her entrance into the game. Before she arrived, players had grown accustomed to a certain rhythm in the arena. They knew the archers with their reliable bows, the musketeer with her trusty rifle, the magic archer with his piercing shots. But the Firecracker? She was something entirely different. She brought with her a philosophy that would reshape how players thought about ranged combat, about splash damage, about the very nature of support troops in the heat of battle. The developers at Supercell had been watching, listening, observing how players engaged with ranged units. They noticed patterns, recognized gaps in the meta, understood that there was room for something that could bridge multiple roles while maintaining a distinct identity. The Firecracker emerged from countless hours of design meetings, balanced discussions, and artistic iterations. She wasn't just another card to fill a roster slot. She was a statement, a declaration that even common rarity troops could command attention and respect. When the announcement trailer dropped, it immediately captured imaginations. Here was this figure, clearly related to the Archer family by her general build and stance, but carrying something radically different. No simple bow and arrows for her. Instead, she wielded a handcrafted wooden rocket launcher, a device that looked both rustic and incredibly dangerous. Inside sat a striped rocket, its colors matching the vibrant team scheme, waiting to be unleashed with devastating effect. The community's reaction was immediate and intense. Forum threads exploded with speculation. What would her stats be? How would she fit into existing deck archetypes? Would she be overpowered at launch, or would she need buffs to find her place? The excitement was palpable, crackling through the air like static electricity before a storm. On January 6, 2020, select players got early access through a special challenge. This wasn't just a test of the card itself, but a test of how the community would adapt to a completely new mechanic. The Firecracker's attack pattern was unlike anything that had come before. She would fire her rocket toward a target, and upon impact, it would explode into 5 separate pieces of shrapnel, each one continuing forward in a cone pattern, piercing through any enemy unfortunate enough to be standing in their path. And then there was the recoil. Oh, the recoil. Every time she fired, the sheer force of the explosion would send her tumbling backward, sliding across the arena tiles like she was skating on ice. This wasn't just a visual flourish. This was a mechanical innovation that would define her entire playstyle, making her unpredictable, difficult to target with spells, and creating a rhythm to her attacks the players would need to master. The early adopters discovered something magical. Here was a 3 elixir common card that could single-handedly change the flow of battle. She excelled at punishing grouped units, could provide sustained damage against air swarms, and had the range to threaten towers from relative safety. But she also came with a massive weakness, one that would become legendary in its own right. She could activate the opponent's king tower with alarming ease if placed incorrectly, turning what should have been an advantage into a devastating self-sabotage. By February 3rd, when she became generally available to all players who had reached Hog Mountain, the Firecracker had already achieved something remarkable. She had generated more discussion, more debate, more passionate argument than most legendary cards. Players either loved her with fierce devotion or viewed her with suspicion and frustration. There was no middle ground, no casual indifference. The Firecracker demanded a reaction, and that reaction was always intense. Her arrival also marked a shift in how Supercell approached card design. She proved that you didn't need legendary rarity or complex mechanics to create something that felt special and unique. Sometimes, all you needed was a simple concept executed brilliantly. A woman with a rocket launcher, a love for explosions, and the courage to embrace the chaos that came with her chosen weapon. The first month after her release saw usage rates climb steadily. Players experimented with her in cycle decks and control decks, even in some beatdown strategies where she could clear away swarm counters. Professional players began featuring her in tournament decks, recognizing that in skilled hands, she could provide value that far exceeded her modest elixir cost. The Firecracker wasn't just a card. She was becoming a phenomenon, and through it all, she maintained her identity. Unlike troops that became defined purely by their statistics or their role in the meta, the Firecracker had personality that shone through every deployment. You could almost imagine her grinning behind that hood as she loaded another rocket, could sense her excitement as the fuse began to burn, could feel her savage joy as the explosion painted the arena in fire and light. This was no mere soldier following orders. This was an artist who had found her medium. This was a pyromaniac who had discovered that her destructive impulses could be channeled, directed, refined into something that wasn't just chaos, but controlled chaos. Beautiful chaos. Necessary chaos. Origins in the arena, but where did she come from? How does an archer decide one day to abandon the elegant simplicity of bow and arrow for the thunderous complexity of rocket-propelled explosives? To understand the Firecracker, we need to understand her roots, her history, the journey that led her to this moment of transformation. She started, like so many others in the arena, as an archer. Not the archer that players deploy on the battlefield, but one of many in training, learning the ancient art of archery that had been passed down through generations of warriors. The bow was tradition. The bow was precision. The bow was everything that the archer corps stood for. Controlled power delivered with unerring accuracy. Young recruits would spend months, sometimes years, perfecting their draw. They learned to feel the tension in the string, to calculate the arc of the arrow's flight, to compensate for wind and distance and the movement of their targets. It was meditation and warfare combined, a practice that demanded complete focus and absolute discipline. For most archers, this was enough. This was fulfilling. This was their calling. But for the one who would become the Firecracker, something was missing. She excelled at the technical aspects. Her aim was true, her release smooth. Her arrows flew straight and struck hard. The instructors praised her potential. Fellow trainees looked to her as an example of what dedication and practice could achieve. On paper, she was the perfect archer, someone destined for distinction in the arena. Yet inside, restlessness grew. Every arrow that hit its mark brought satisfaction, but it was fleeting, insufficient. She began to realize that what she craved wasn't the quiet pride of a job well done. What she wanted was spectacle, drama, the kind of impact that couldn't be ignored or overlooked. When her arrow struck an enemy, they would fall. Yes, but there was no announcement of it. No moment where the entire battlefield had to stop and take notice. The turning point came during a rare ceasefire. One of those mysterious pauses in the eternal conflict when warriors were granted brief respite from their duties. While others rested or socialized, she found herself drawn to the arena's munitions. Depot, a place where explosive ordnance was stored for siege weapons and defensive structures. The bombs, the rockets, the firecrackers used for celebrations and signal flares. All of them sitting there, potential energy waiting to be released died, she picked up one of the celebratory firecrackers, feeling its weight, examining its construction. It was simple, really. A tube packed with powder, a fuse to ignite it, a careful balance of components designed to create light and sound in that wonderful, terrible burst of force. Her mind began to race. What if this could be weaponized? What if the principles that made these celebration devices so effective could be applied to combat? The first experiments were conducted in secret, during those precious hours when the arena slept and oversight was minimal. She fashioned a crude launcher from spare wood and metal fittings, creating something that could hold and aim a rocket without immediately destroying itself or its operator. The earliest attempts were disasters. Rockets that exploded prematurely, launchers that shattered from the force, burns and minor injuries that she had to hide from the instructors. But failure only fueled her determination. Each setback taught her something new. She learned about structural integrity, about the angles needed to handle recoil, about timing and trajectory, and the thousand small details that separated a weapon from a liability. She studied the fireworks used in celebrations, noting how their designers created patterns in the explosions, how shrapnel could be directed and controlled rather than simply scattered randomly. Months passed. Her official training continued, and she maintained the facade of a dutiful archer candidate. But her real education was happening in those stolen hours. In that workshop she'd claimed as her own, surrounded by sketches and failed prototypes and the lingering smell of gunpowder that never quite washed away. The breakthrough came when she realized she was thinking about the problem wrong. She'd been trying to eliminate the recoil, to create a launcher that stayed perfectly still when fired. But what if the recoil wasn't a problem to be solved? What if it was a feature to be embraced? The backward movement could create distance from enemies, could make her harder to target, could become part of her fighting style rather than a limitation of her weapon. With this revelation, everything changed. She redesigned the launcher to accommodate the recoil, to use it rather than fight against it. She adjusted her stance, learning to flow with the backward momentum rather than resist it. She practiced until the motion became natural, until firing and sliding back was one fluid movement rather than action and reaction. The rocket design evolved too. She experimented with different powder mixtures, different casing materials, different ways of packing the interior to achieve maximum effect. What she wanted was an initial impact followed by a spreading pattern, something that could strike a primary target and then shower everything behind it with secondary damage. It took countless iterations, but she finally achieved it. 5 distinct pieces of shrapnel, each one carrying enough force to harm, spreading out in a cone that could catch multiple enemies. When she finally felt ready to demonstrate her creation, she didn't go to the instructors. She knew they would see only deviation from tradition, would focus on the risks rather than the potential. Instead, she went to the arena quartermaster, the grizzled veteran responsible for equipping troops and evaluating new weapons. She showed him what she'd built, explained her vision, and then asked for a chance to prove it worked. The demonstration was set for dawn, when the arena was empty except for a few observers. Training dummies were arranged in various formations, simulating different combat scenarios. The quartermaster watched with crossed arms and a skeptical expression as she took her position, loaded her first rocket, and prepared to fire. The explosion echoed across the empty arena, a sound that made birds scatter from the nearby trees and sent several guards running to investigate. The primary dummy was obliterated, reduced to splinters, and scattered straw. The 4 dummies behind it weren't destroyed, but showed significant damage, struck by the spreading shrapnel pattern. And the archer-turned-firecracker stood 15 feet back from where she'd fired, having slid smoothly in response to the recoil. For a long moment, silence. The quartermaster walked to examine the dummies, inspecting the damage patterns, calculating in his mind what this weapon could mean in actual combat. Finally, he turned back to her and nodded once. It was a small gesture, but it contained multitudes. Approval, recognition, the acknowledgement that she'd created something genuinely useful. Within a week, she was removed from standard archer training and assigned to a special program. The rocket launcher was refined, reinforced, optimized for repeated use. A uniform was designed that offered protection while allowing the mobility she needed. The hood, the gloves, the reinforced boots that could handle the friction of her constant sliding retreats. Most importantly, a distinctive headband in team colors, marking her as something new, something different from the traditional archers she trained alongside. The name came naturally. She worked with fire, with explosive force, with the crack and boom of detonations. Firecracker. It fit perfectly, capturing both the celebratory origin of her weapon and the dangerous reality of what she brought to battle. Her former fellow archer trainees had mixed reactions. Some saw her as a traitor to tradition, someone who'd abandoned the purity of archery for something crude and destructive. Others viewed her with envy, wishing they'd had the courage to similarly break from convention. A few became genuine friends, recognizing that her choice wasn't a rejection of them, but an affirmation of her own identity, her own path. The day finally came when she was deemed ready for actual combat deployment. She stood at the edge of the arena, rocket launcher resting on her shoulder, feeling the weight of eyes on her. Some were curious, wondering if this experiment would prove worthwhile. Others were doubtful, expecting her to fail spectacularly and prove that the old ways were best. And a few, just a few, looked at her with something like hope, inspired by the idea that you didn't have to accept the role you were given, that you could forge your own identity even in a world as structured as the arena. She loaded her first combat rocket, felt the familiar weight settle into the launcher, watched the fuse begin its slow burn toward ignition. The target was a swarm of small enemies, perfect for demonstrating what her weapon could do. She aimed, breathed out slowly, and pulled the trigger. The explosion was beautiful. Design philosophy and visual identity. Let's talk about how the Firecracker looks. Because in the arena, appearance isn't just cosmetic. It tells a story. It conveys personality. It lets you understand who someone is before they ever take a single action. And the Firecracker's visual design is a masterclass in character communication through appearance. Start with the silhouette. Even at a distance, even reduced to just a shape on the battlefield, you can identify the Firecracker immediately. She shares the basic body structure with the archers, that lean, athletic build of someone who's spent years training for combat. But where archers stand with that classic archer stance, weight balanced, bow drawn, the Firecracker's posture is different. There's an energy to it, a barely contained enthusiasm. She stands like someone ready to move, ready to dodge, ready to slide backward at a moment's notice. The rocket launcher is the centerpiece, of course. It's deliberately rustic in design, handcrafted rather than factory-made. The wood has that weathered look of something that's been used extensively, scarred by countless launches, stained by powder residue, and the char of proximity to explosions. The metal fittings are functional rather than decorative, reinforced at stress points. Designed to handle forces that would tear apart lesser constructions. Inside the launcher sits the rocket itself, visible even before it's fired. This visual detail is important. It creates anticipation. You can see that striped projectile waiting there, can imagine it screaming toward its target, can almost hear the explosion before it happens. The stripes match team colors, either blue or red, depending on which side of the bridge you're fighting from. It's a small detail, but it creates that sense of belonging, of being part of a larger force, even while maintaining individual identity. The headband is iconic. It's not just team-colored fabric. It's a statement. Think about the symbolism of a headband in combat contexts. It keeps hair out of your eyes, yes, but it's also a mark of determination, of someone who's ready for serious work. The Firecracker's headband is always bold, always visible, a splash of color that draws the eye, even in the chaos of battle. Her tunic follows similar design principles to the archer's, but with modifications. It's slightly more reinforced around the shoulders and chest, protection against the heat and force of proximity to explosions. The team-colored elements are integrated throughout, creating visual harmony while maintaining that sense of identity. The black hood adds an element of mystery, shadows that obscure details while highlighting the features we can see. The gloves are practical, designed for handling explosive ordnance. They need to protect while maintaining dexterity, allowing her to load rockets quickly without fumbling. The material appears thick, heat-resistant, probably treated with some kind of fire-retardant coating. The boots follow similar logic, built for friction and impact, designed to handle the constant sliding that defines her combat style. But here's what makes the visual design truly brilliant. It's the combination of elements that shouldn't work together, but somehow do. She's got this traditional warrior aesthetic with the hood and tunic, but she's carrying this crude, powerful weapon that feels almost anachronistic. She looks nimble and light, but she wields something that creates massive explosions. She appears serious and focused, but there's that undercurrent of barely suppressed excitement, of someone who genuinely loves what they do. The artists who created her knew exactly what they were doing. The concept artist, Lyosha Kalibin, established the core visual identity. The look development artist, Cal Vaiswanan, refined it, adding textures and details that made her feel real and lived in. The lighting and final renders brought everything together, ensuring she looked equally good, whether viewed from the front, side, or back. Whether standing still or in the middle of that signature recoil slide. The developers faced interesting challenges during her creation. How do you make a character who uses explosives fit into the Clash universe's established aesthetic? The Clash style is cartoony but grounded, exaggerated but believable within its own internal logic. The Firecracker needed to feel like she belonged in this world, like she was a natural evolution of existing character types rather than something imported from outside. The solution was in the details. The rocket launcher, while unique to her, shares design language with other wooden structures in the Clash universe. The metal fittings look like they could have come from the same forges that produce armor and weapons for Knights and P.E.K.K.A. The explosions themselves, when they occur, use the same visual effects framework as fireballs and rockets. Creating continuity, even in destruction. Color theory played a huge role. The team colors anchor her to the game's existing palette, ensuring she reads clearly in the heat of battle. The black hood and gloves provide contrast, preventing her from becoming just a blob of red or blue. The wood tones of the launcher add warmth, making her feel more approachable despite the destructive power she wields. There's also the matter of scale. The Firecracker is correctly proportioned for the arena, sized appropriately relative to other troops and structures. But her weapon adds visual weight, making her feel more substantial than her 3 elixir cost might suggest. This is important. Players need to feel like they're getting value, need to perceive power even in common rarity cards. The Evolution version, introduced much later in June 2023, takes these design principles and amplifies them. The navy and gray-colored tunic with its evolution symbol immediately communicates enhanced status. The indigo coloring throughout creates a more mystical, powerful appearance. The golden fuse on her rocket adds that touch of premium quality, that suggestion of improved performance. It's the same character fundamentally, but elevated, refined, showing what happens when someone already skilled pushes themselves to an even higher level. But what really makes the design memorable is the personality it conveys. You look at the Firecracker, and you understand things about her without needing explicit explanation. You see that she's confident, maybe a bit reckless. You sense her enthusiasm for her craft. You recognize that she's someone who's chosen this path deliberately, who's embraced the chaos and made it her own. This is why her design has inspired so much fan art, why artists in the community love drawing her. She's got that perfect combination of clear, recognizable elements and room for interpretation. The core identity is strong enough that she's always identifiable, but there's flexibility in the details, space for artists to add their own style and vision. The unveiling video for the Firecracker, showcasing her design and abilities, achieved something remarkable. It hit trending rank #2 on YouTube. Think about that for a moment. In a platform filled with content creators competing for attention, a character reveal for a mobile game card captured imaginations enough to trend globally. That's the power of strong visual design combined with an interesting concept. People saw the Firecracker and immediately wanted to know more, wanted to experience playing with her, wanted to be part of this explosive new addition to the arena. The design team could have played it safe, could have created just another Archer variant with minimal changes. Instead, they took risks. They created something that stood out, that demanded attention, that became instantly iconic. The Firecracker's appearance isn't just memorable, it's definitive. She looks exactly like what she is, a pyromaniac who found a calling in controlled chaos, an artist whose medium is explosion, a warrior who understands that sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is through spectacular destruction. The pyromantic nature lets talk about what drives her. Not the mechanics, not the strategy, but the psychology. What kind of person chooses explosives as their weapon? What kind of mind looks at fire and destruction and sees not danger, but possibility? The Firecracker isn't just someone who happens to use explosive weapons. She's someone drawn to them, someone who needs them, someone whose very nature finds expression in the flash and thunder of detonation. The term pyromaniac gets thrown around casually, often incorrectly. True pyromania is a recognized condition, a fascination with fire that goes beyond mere interest into something deeper, more consuming. But in the context of the Firecracker, we're not talking about disorder or dysfunction. We're talking about someone who's channeled that attraction to flame and explosion into something productive, something that serves a purpose beyond mere destruction. She loves fire, not in the abstract, not as a concept, but as a physical reality. She loves the heat against her skin, the way it makes the air shimmer and dance. She loves the colors, the way flames shift from orange to yellow to blue, depending on temperature and fuel. She loves the smell, that acrid scent of burning that others find unpleasant, but she finds intoxicating. Most of all, she loves the sound. The crack of ignition, the roar of combustion, the thunderous boom when something explodes. But fire alone isn't enough for her. Fire is beautiful, yes, but it's somewhat predictable. Once started, it simply burns until fuel is exhausted or oxygen depleted. What captivates the Firecracker is the moment of explosion, that instant when potential energy becomes kinetic, when force is released all at once in a manner both violent and exquisite. Explosions are controlled chaos, planned spontaneity, destruction with purpose. Her morning routine, if you can call it that, involves checking her rockets obsessively. Each one is examined for defects, weighed to ensure proper powder loading, tested for fuse integrity. This isn't paranoia or anxiety. This is love. She handles each rocket the way a musician handles their instrument, with care and respect and a deep appreciation for what it can do when used correctly. Between battles, when other troops are resting or socializing, she can often be found at the armory, not just maintaining her launcher, though she does that too, No, she's experimenting, tinkering, always trying to find ways to make the explosions bigger, brighter, more spectacular. The armory master has learned to give her space, recognizing that her modifications, while sometimes alarming, generally improve performance rather than creating hazards. There's a purity to her focus that's almost meditative. When she's working with explosive materials, everything else fades away. The politics of the arena, the rivalries between troops, the endless cycle of battle and respawn, none of it matters. In those moments, there's only her, the materials, and the challenge of perfect creation. Every rocket she crafts is a small work of art, something that will exist briefly but brilliantly before fulfilling its purpose. She has theories about explosions, complex ideas about timing and force distribution that she enthusiastically explained to anyone patient enough to listen. Most troops don't understand half of what she's saying, but they recognize the passion behind the words. She talks about blast radii and shrapnel, patterns the way poets talk about meter and rhyme, seeing elegance in something others view as simple destruction. But here's what makes her fascinating rather than frightening. She's not destructive for destruction's sake. She's not trying to hurt people or cause chaos without purpose. Every explosion she creates serves a function. Every rocket fired has a target, a reason, a place in the larger tactical picture. She's managed to take this attraction to fire and force and channel it into something that helps her side win battles, that protects allies, that contributes meaningfully to the eternal conflict of the arena. That her fellow troops have varying opinions about her. Some find her intensity off-putting, prefer the company of warriors who can relax completely when off-duty. Others respect her dedication, recognizing that this level of focus is rare and valuable. A few are genuinely concerned, worried that someday she'd go too far, push past the boundaries of acceptable risk in pursuit of ever more impressive explosions. But she's never careless. This is crucial to understand. Her love of explosions doesn't make her reckless. If anything, it makes her more careful, more considerate of variables, more aware of what can go wrong. She understands intimately what explosive force can do, respects it in a way that only someone who works with it constantly can. The controlled chaos she creates isn't accidental. It's deliberate, planned, executed with precision that belies the spectacular violence of the results. There are quiet moments, rare but real, when she watches fireworks displays during arena celebrations. Not the military rockets she uses in combat, but the purely celebratory kind, designed solely to create beauty in the sky. During these moments, something in her expression softens. The intensity remains, but it's tempered by appreciation, by joy that's unmarred by tactical considerations. These explosions exist purely to be beautiful, and she finds that purity profound. She has favorite types of explosions. Quick, sharp detonations that are over almost before they begin. Sustained burns that build gradually before climaxing in spectacular release. Cascading chains where one explosion triggers others in sequence. Multi-stage rockets that explode once on impact, then again as components separate. Each type has its place, its purpose, its particular aesthetic appeal. The evolved Firecracker description is telling. Some firecrackers just want to watch the world burn. Especially this one. It's playful, tongue-in-cheek, but there's truth in it. She does want to watch the world burn. Not out of malice, but out of genuine appreciation for the process. Burning is transformation. Fire takes one thing and makes it something else. Explosions are transformation accelerated, compressed into an instant so brief that the eye can barely track it. That instant of transformation is what she lives for. Her relationship with her weapon is almost symbiotic. The launcher isn't just a tool she uses. It's an extension of herself, a physical manifestation of her internal nature. When she fires, she's not just releasing a projectile. She's expressing something fundamental about who she is, creating in the world something that matches what exists inside her. Each explosion is a statement, a declaration, a small piece of her soul made visible. Other troops create through construction or healing or support. The Firecracker creates through destruction, and there's something profound in that paradox. She takes explosive force, something inherently chaotic and dangerous, and turns it into art. She makes it purposeful. She proves that even destruction can be beautiful when executed with skill and understanding and genuine love for the craft. In her quietest moments, when pressed to explain why she chose this path, she doesn't talk about power or effectiveness or tactical advantages. She talks about the moment. That brief instant between trigger pull and impact, when the rocket is in flight, when potential is about to become actual. Everything exists in that moment. All possibilities, all outcomes, compressed into the fraction of a second before explosion. That moment, she says, is the only time she feels completely alive, completely herself, completely present in the world. She is the Firecracker, not because of her weapon, not because of her role in battle. Not because of her role in battle, but because at her core, in the deepest part of who she is, she understands that sometimes the world needs someone willing to embrace the explosion, someone who sees beauty in the boom, someone who knows that controlled chaos isn't contradiction, but truth. The fire that burns inside her matches the fire she creates outside. And that perfect alignment of internal nature with external expression is what makes her not just a soldier, but an artist. A pyromaniac artist whose canvas is the battlefield and whose paint is explosive force. Mechanics of destruction. Now let's get technical. Let's talk about exactly how the Firecracker's weapon works, because understanding the mechanics helps us appreciate the genius behind the design. This isn't magic. This is physics, chemistry, and engineering combined in a way that's both deadly and elegant. The launcher itself is deceptively simple. At its core, it's a tube that holds and directs a rocket, reinforced to handle the forces involved in launch. But simple doesn't mean crude. Every element of its construction serves multiple purposes. Every choice made during design reflects deep understanding of the requirements. The tube is wooden, specifically hardwood that's been treated to resist heat and splintering. Wood is chosen over metal for several reasons. It's lighter, making the launcher more maneuverable. It provides some natural shock absorption, reducing the stress on the user during firing. And perhaps most importantly, it can be easily modified and repaired in the field. The Firecracker isn't working with military-grade equipment backed by industrial manufacturing. She's using something closer to artisan-crafted tools, where maintainability and adaptability matter more than perfection. Metal reinforcement bands wrap around the tube at regular intervals, preventing the wood from splitting under pressure. These bands are carefully positioned based on stress calculations, placed exactly where forces will be greatest during launch. They're also adjustable, able to be tightened or loosened to maintain proper alignment as the wood naturally expands and contracts with temperature and humidity changes. The trigger mechanism is elegant in its simplicity. Pull it, and it strikes an igniter against the rocket's fuse, starting the burn that will lead to launch. There's a carefully calibrated delay between trigger pull and actual launch, giving the Firecracker time to aim and brace. Too short a delay and she couldn't achieve precision. Too long and the weapon becomes impractical in fast-paced combat. The current timing is the result of extensive testing, finding the sweet spot where accuracy and practicality intersect. Now, the rockets themselves. These are marvels of compact engineering. Each one contains multiple components working together to achieve the desired effect. The outer casing is rigid enough to survive the launch, but designed to fragment in a specific pattern upon impact. Inside is the propellant, a carefully formulated mixture of chemicals that burns quickly and produces tremendous force in a controlled direction. The stripes on the rocket aren't just decorative, though they do serve that purpose. They're also markers, visual indicators of the rocket's orientation. The firecracker can glance at a rocket and immediately know which end is for, which way it will fly. In the heat of loading, when seconds matter, this instant recognition is invaluable. The fuse is protected by a cover until the rocket is loaded into the launcher. Once loaded, the cover automatically opens, exposing the fuse to the igniter. This safety feature prevents accidental detonation while the rocket is being handled. It's simple, mechanical, foolproof in the best possible way. When fired, the rocket accelerates quickly, reaching operational velocity within the first few feet of travel. The propellant burns in a precisely controlled manner, creating thrust that pushes the rocket forward while creating equal and opposite force that shoves the launcher backward. This is basic physics, Newton's third law in action, but the implications are complex. The recoil force is substantial. We're talking about enough backward momentum to send someone sliding several feet across the arena floor. Most weapons users would try to eliminate this to create a stable firing platform. But the firecracker embraces it, uses it. Her boots have specially treated soles that reduce friction just enough to allow smooth sliding without losing all control. Her stance when firing is optimized to transfer the recoil force efficiently, letting her body move as one unit rather than fighting internal tensions. This backward movement serves multiple tactical purposes. It creates distance from enemies, particularly useful against melee troops trying to close in. It makes her harder to target with precision spells, as her position is constantly changing. And it creates a rhythm to her attacks that enemies struggle to predict. She fires, slides back, resets, fires again. The pattern varies based on terrain and tactical needs, but the fundamental cycle remains constant. The flight path of the rocket is carefully calculated. The angle of launch, the burn rate of the propellant, the weight distribution of the projectile, all of these factors combine to create a ballistic arc. The firecracker has internalized these calculations through thousands of hours of practice. She doesn't consciously think about trajectory anymore. Her body knows instinctively where to aim to hit targets at various ranges. Impact is where things get really interesting. The rocket is designed to detonate on contact, not through timing. This ensures it explodes exactly where intended rather than potentially missing if the fuse timing is off. The detonation itself is a carefully orchestrated event. The primary explosion happens in the nose of the rocket, creating the initial blast force and damage. But microseconds later, the casing fragments in a predetermined pattern. 5 pieces of shrapnel shoot forward in a cone pattern. These aren't random fragments. They're specifically designed components that separate from the rocket during explosion. Each piece is heavy enough to carry momentum and cause damage, but small enough to travel in a relatively predictable pattern. The angle of the cone is carefully calculated to maximize coverage while maintaining effective range. This shrapnel pattern is what makes the firecracker truly special. A direct hit with the rocket deals significant damage to the primary target, but everything behind that target, within the cone of shrapnel spread, takes secondary damage. This allows her to hit multiple enemies with a single shot, to punish grouped units, to strike targets that thought they were safely behind a tank. The shrapnel pieces pierce through enemies, meaning they don't stop on first contact. If units are lined up perfectly, a single shot can damage 3, 4, even 5 separate targets. This piercing property makes her incredibly effective against swarm strategies, where multiple small units cluster together. One rocket can devastate what would normally require multiple attacks to clear. But here's the crucial detail that defines high-level firecracker play. The shrapnel can hit your own towers. If the firecracker is positioned poorly, if she fires at the wrong angle, those fragments that pierce through enemies will continue traveling until they hit something else. And if that something else happens to be your king tower, positioned behind your princess towers, you've just activated it, giving your opponent a massive strategic advantage. This risk-reward dynamic is central to the Firecracker's identity. She offers tremendous value, but only if deployed correctly. Skilled players learn the safe zones, the angles that keep shrapnel away from friendly structures. They understand positioning in a way that goes beyond simple front versus back thinking. They calculate trajectories, predict movement, adjust placement based on what the opponent is likely to deploy. The range of her weapon is another crucial factor. At 6.5 tiles, she outranges most troops and can even threaten towers from relative safety. This range isn't arbitrary. It's long enough to be useful, to allow her to attack from positions that keep her relatively safe, but not so long that she becomes impossible to counter. The balance between range and vulnerability is delicate, intentionally so. Her hit speed tells another part of the story. 3 seconds between shots. That's the time needed to load a new rocket, align the launcher, pull the trigger, and deal with the recoil from the previous shot. 3 seconds might not sound like much, but in arena combat where frames can matter, it's an eternity. This relatively slow attack speed means the Firecracker needs protection, needs to be deployed behind tanks or alongside troops that can handle enemies that get close. The damage numbers have evolved over time through various balance changes, but the fundamental principle remains. She deals moderate damage to the primary target and reduced damage to secondary targets hit by shrapnel. This split damage model rewards good positioning and punishes grouping while preventing her from being oppressively powerful. Her health pool is deliberately low. At 3 elixir, she's cost-effective, but she can't take much punishment. This fragility is intentional, creating counterplay opportunities. Small spells like Zap or Snowball can't kill her outright, but can stop her attack and potentially allow enemy troops to reach her. Arrows can eliminate her completely, creating a 1 elixir advantage for the opponent. Fireball is overkill, but guarantees the removal. This vulnerability to spells creates interesting strategic decisions. Do you use your small spell to reset her attack, preventing damage but not eliminating the threat? Do you commit a medium spell for guaranteed removal, but potentially waste elixir? Do you ignore her and accept the damage while pushing the opposite lane? Each choice has implications, creates branching paths in the tactical decision tree. The evolution version adds another layer to her mechanics. She gains the spark ability, which triggers after every 4 shots. This spark is essentially an extra rocket that fires automatically at a random target, dealing damage and creating that same shrapnel spread. The randomness of the target prevents it from being too powerful, too easily exploitable, but it adds meaningful value over the course of a match. The spark doesn't require extra loading or aiming. It just happens, another explosion in the Firecracker's signature cone pattern. This ability rewards sustained deployment, encourages players to protect their Firecracker and let her keep firing. 4 shots might seem like a lot, but in a long match, she triggered the spark ability multiple times, adding significant chip damage and swarm clear potential. The evolved version also gains increased health and damage, making her more resilient and more threatening. She's still vulnerable to spells, still requires careful positioning, but she's more forgiving of minor mistakes, more capable of surviving incidental damage. These improvements justify the evolution cost, making her feel meaningfully stronger without completely changing her identity. Understanding these mechanics, really internalizing how every component works together, separates players who use the Firecracker from players who master her. The former simply drops her in the back and hopes for value. The latter calculates angles, predicts enemy deployments, positions her with surgical precision to maximize damage while eliminating risk. Every rocket fired is a small optimization problem. Where exactly should she stand? Which enemy should she target? Will the recoil move her into a better or worse position? What's the opponent likely to play next? And how will that affect their effectiveness? These questions run through skilled players' minds constantly, informing decisions that might look simple but reflect deep understanding. The mechanics also create personality. The way she fires and immediately slides backward gives her this distinctive jerky movement pattern. She's never still, always repositioning, always in motion. This creates a visual identity that's instantly recognizable, making her feel alive and reactive rather than static and scripted. The sound design reinforces the mechanics. The whoosh of the rocket launching, the boom of impact, the secondary pops as shrapnel hits additional targets. Each sound provides feedback, confirms what happened, creates that satisfying sense of cause and effect. Players don't just see the damage numbers. They hear the explosion, feel the impact through audio cues that make every shot feel substantial. These mechanics didn't emerge fully formed. They're the result of extensive testing, countless iterations, refinement based on player feedback, and observed usage patterns. Balance changes have tweaked numbers, adjusted timing, modified interactions. But the core mechanical identity, rocket with recoil and spreading shrapnel, has remained constant. It's the foundation everything else builds upon, the defining characteristic that makes the Firecracker who she is. In understanding the mechanics, we understand the character. She's precise chaos. She's controlled destruction. She has physics and chemistry and psychology all working together to create something that is both deadly effective and deeply satisfying. The mechanics aren't just numbers on a card. They're the language through which her personality speaks, the medium through which her story is told. Every rocket fired, every slide backward, every explosion that paints the arena in fire, these are her words. And together, they tell a story of someone who found exactly where they belong. The Archer connection. To truly understand the Firecracker, we need to examine her relationship with the Archers, the troops she trained alongside, the family she both belongs to and has diverged from. This relationship is complex, layered with respect and rebellion, tradition and innovation, connection and separation. It defines much of who she is and why her journey matters. The Archer is one of the oldest troops in the Clash universe, appearing in Clash of Clans before Clash Royale even existed. When Clash Royale launched, the Archers were there from the beginning, part of the training camp, available to every player immediately. They represent fundamentals, basics, the foundation upon which so much strategy builds. 2 ranged attackers for 3 elixir, reliable damage, simple to understand, but with depth for skilled players. The Firecracker's connection to this lineage is undeniable. Her basic body structure matches the Archer's. Her cost mirrors theirs, 3 elixir, creating direct comparison. Her role is similar ranged damage dealer, with particular effectiveness against swarms and air units. Players who understand how to use Archers have a head start in understanding Firecracker deployment. But the differences are equally important. Where Archers are about consistency, the Firecracker is about impact. Archers steadily chip away at targets, their arrows flying in reliable rhythm. The Firecracker punctuates battle with explosions, her attacks less frequent but more spectacular. Archers can be split to pressure both lanes simultaneously. The Firecracker is indivisible, her power concentrated in single deployments. The training they share creates a common foundation. Both learned about range management, understanding when to attack and when to hold fire. Both studied target prioritization, knowing which enemy to focus on in complex situations. Both practiced positioning, finding angles that maximize effectiveness while minimizing vulnerability. These fundamental skills translate across weapon types, creating underlying similarity despite surface differences. But their philosophical approaches diverge dramatically. Archer training emphasizes patience and consistency. You aim, you release. You trust in the straightforward relationship between effort and result. Firecracker methodology embraces variables, acknowledges that every shot creates unpredictable elements and finds beauty in managing controlled chaos. Where archers seek to eliminate unknowns, the Firecracker has learned to dance with them. Among the archer community, the Firecracker is a controversial figure. The traditionalists view her choice as a betrayal, abandoning proven methods for something flashy and dangerous. They point to her vulnerability, her potential to sabotage her own team, her relatively slow attack speed. They see someone who was gifted with talent for archery and squandered it chasing explosions. The progressives see her differently. They recognize that evolution requires divergence, that new tactics emerge only when someone is willing to break from tradition. They admire her courage in pursuing an unconventional path, her dedication to mastering something difficult and different. They see not betrayal but innovation, not abandonment but expansion. The archers deployed in battle alongside her have learned to work with her quirks. They know to position themselves away from her firing lines, avoiding both her recoil slides and her shrapnel spread. They've developed synchronized tactics, where archers steadily damage tanky enemies while the Firecracker clears supporting swarms. The combination can be devastating when executed properly, tradition and innovation working together. There's a respect that exists between them, even when disagreement persists. The archers recognize that the Firecracker's weapon, whatever they think of it, is devastatingly effective in the right situations. The Firecracker acknowledges that archery's elegance and reliability have value, that her explosions couldn't exist in isolation without the supporting structure the more traditional troops provide. Family gatherings, those rare moments when the eternal conflict pauses, can be complicated. The Firecracker sits with her archer relatives, and conversations dance around their differences. They discuss tactics generally, avoiding the specific disagreements about methodology. They share stories of battle, finding common ground in the experience even when their roles differ. But there's always an undercurrent, an acknowledgement that one of them chose a different path. The younger archers in training look at the Firecracker with complicated emotions. Some see possibility, inspiration, that their role isn't fixed, that they could forge their own identity if they found something they loved enough. Others feel pressure, worry that simply being good at archery won't be enough anymore, that they'll be expected to innovate when they prefer to perfect existing techniques. Instructors use the Firecracker as a teaching tool, though not always in ways she appreciates. See what happens when you abandon fundamentals, one instructor might say, pointing to a match where an improper Firecracker placement activated the King Tower. See what's possible when you master fundamentals and then build on them, another might counter, highlighting a perfectly executed Firecracker defense that stopped a major push. The Magic Archer represents another interesting comparison point. He also diverged from standard archery, adding magical properties that make his arrows pierce infinitely. But his divergence stayed within the archery framework. He still uses a bow, still relies on the core techniques. The Firecracker's departure was more radical, abandoning the bow entirely for something completely different. This makes her both more controversial and more distinctive. There's a photo, or something like a photo, in the Archer Barracks. It shows a training class from years ago, before the Firecracker made her choice. She's there among the others, bow in hand, looking like she belongs completely. Veterans who knew her then sometimes talk about how skilled she was, how her form was textbook perfect, how instructors predicted great things. And they wonder, quietly, what she might have achieved if she'd stayed the course. But others, the ones who knew her best, saw the restlessness even then. They noticed how her eyes would wander during long training sessions, how she seemed most engaged when discussing new techniques rather than perfecting old ones. They weren't surprised when she made her choice, recognized it as inevitable rather than unexpected. The Firecracker she became was always there, waiting for the right catalyst to emerge. The relationship extends beyond individuals to the broader tactical ecosystem. In deck building, Firecracker and archers occupy similar slots, range support troops at 3 elixir. Players choosing between them make decisions based on preference, playstyle, and specific strategic needs. This creates natural comparison, endless debates about which is better in various situations. Competitive players have generally concluded that they serve different purposes. Archers are more consistent, easier to value, less likely to backfire. Firecracker has higher potential, but requires more skill, more understanding, more precision in deployment. Neither is universally better. Context determines optimal choice. This parity is itself a form of respect, acknowledging that the Firecracker's radical departure created something of equivalent strategic value to the traditional approach. In the end, the Archer connection defines the Firecracker through both similarity and difference. She comes from this family, carries their DNA, shares their fundamental understanding of ranged combat. But she's also separate, distinct, having chosen a path that sets her apart. The relationship is neither completely harmonious nor entirely antagonistic. It's complicated, nuanced, real, just like family relationships often are. The Firecracker remains an archer in some essential way, carries that identity even while transcending it. She's proof that you can honor your origins while forging your own path, can respect tradition while pursuing innovation, can belong to a family while being uniquely yourself. The bow and the rocket launcher are different weapons, but the hands that wield them learned their basic skills in the same training grounds. And that shared foundation, that common origin, creates bonds that neither divergence nor disagreement can completely sever. Training days and early battles. Let's go back to the beginning, to those formative days when the Firecracker was learning to master her weapon, discovering how to turn theoretical understanding into practical skill. This period shaped her, taught lessons that would define her entire approach to combat. Every master has an apprenticeship. Every expert was once a stumbling beginner. The Firecracker is no exception. The first time she tried to fire her newly authorized rocket launcher in official training conditions, she missed completely. The target was stationary, positioned at moderate range, an easy shot by any reasonable standard. But she was nervous, overeager, pulled the trigger before properly aligning. The rocket screamed off at a wild angle, exploding harmlessly against the arena wall. The recoil sent her tumbling backward, unprepared for the force, landing hard on her backside while training officers tried unsuccessfully to hide their laughter. That moment could have been discouraging. Instead, it became instructive. She learned that confidence without technique was worse than useless, that her weapon wouldn't magically work just because she wanted it to. She had to earn proficiency, had to build skill through repetition and adjustment and countless incremental improvements. The training program developed for her was unique, without precedent. The arena had trained countless archers, musketeers, wizards, but never someone using this particular weapon. Instructors had to figure out methodology on the fly, learning alongside their student what worked and what didn't. It was collaborative innovation, everybody involved in uncharted territory. Basic accuracy came first. Stationary targets at fixed ranges. Fire, assess results, adjust, fire again. Simple repetition building muscle memory, teaching her body the relationship between aim and outcome. Days of this, then weeks, until she could reliably hit what she aimed at. It was tedious work, unglamorous, but absolutely necessary. No amount of enthusiasm could substitute for fundamental competence. Once accuracy was established, they introduced complexity. Moving targets that required leading the shot, calculating where they'd be when the rocket arrived. Targets at varying ranges that demanded adjustment in aim angle. Multiple targets requiring rapid assessment of priorities. Each new variable added difficulty, created new opportunities for failure, pushed her to expand her capabilities. The recoil management was its own entire training track. She had to learn to absorb the force efficiently, to let it move her without losing balance or control. Initially, every shot sent her sprawling or stumbling. Gradually, she developed a technique that would become signature, that smooth backward slide that repositioned her while keeping the launcher ready for the next shot. This took longer to master than the accuracy, required completely retraining her body's instincts about stability and movement. Then came shrapnel optimization. Understanding that her weapon could hit multiple targets was one thing. Actually using that property effectively was completely different. She practiced with carefully arranged dummy groups, learning the angles that would maximize secondary damage. She discovered that small adjustments in aim, barely visible differences in position, could mean the difference between hitting one target versus 5. The instructors introduced failure scenarios deliberately. They'd arranged dummies representing her own towers, forcing her to attack targets while avoiding friendly fire. Early in training, she activated the simulated King Tower repeatedly. Each time, the training officer would stop the exercise, explain why it happened, show her the angle that caused the problem. It was frustrating, embarrassing, but crucial. Better to learn these lessons in training than in actual battle where the consequences were real. Live combat drills came next, sparring against other troops in controlled environments. These taught her things no static training could. Real enemies moved unpredictably, didn't stand still waiting to be hit. They tried to close distance, to overwhelm her before she could fire enough rockets. They learned her patterns and adapted, forcing her to constantly vary tactics. This dynamic interaction taught her more about actual combat than months of target practice ever could. Her first official battle deployment was a small skirmish, low-stakes testing whether she was ready for real arena combat. She was assigned to a defensive position, tasked with supporting more experienced troops. The matchup was straightforward, nothing that would truly test her limits. She fired 3 rockets total, hit 2 targets cleanly, missed once when she overcorrected after the previous shot. Her team won easily, but she knew the victory had little to do with her contribution. The real test came several battles later, a high-intensity match where her team was outmatched and desperate. The opponent deployed a massive skeleton swarm supported by heavier troops, a push designed to overwhelm through sheer numbers. The Firecracker's teammates looked to her, needed her to do exactly what her weapon was designed for. Clear the swarm. Create space. Buy time. She positioned carefully, calculated the angle, fired. The rocket struck the front of the swarm, and shrapnel tore through the grouped skeletons like paper. One shot eliminated dozens of enemies, crumbling their push into manageable pieces. Her teammates rallied, counterattacked, turned a defensive crisis into an offensive opportunity. And the Firecracker, watching the chaos she created, felt something click into place. This was what she was meant to do. This was why her weapon existed. But success brought overconfidence. In the next match, emboldened by her previous performance, she positioned aggressively, too far forward. An enemy fireball caught her alongside several other troops, eliminating her instantly. Her team had to fight short-handed, struggled to defend without her, ultimately lost. The lesson was harsh, but necessary. Effectiveness meant nothing if you didn't survive to deliver it. Positioning wasn't just about maximizing damage. It was about threat assessment, risk management, ensuring you lived long enough to provide sustained value. She began studying replays obsessively, watching her matches and those of others. She noted positioning patterns, successful defensive setups, angles that consistently created value. She saw her mistakes in brutal detail, watching herself make errors that seemed obvious in retrospect, but had been invisible in the moment's heat. This analytical approach accelerated her development, letting her learn from experiences beyond just her own. The training yard became her second home. Before official duties, after battles ended, during any free moment, she'd practice, loading drills to improve speed, accuracy exercises to maintain precision, recoil management repetitions until the backward slide was smoother than walking. Other troops would sometimes stop to watch, fascinated by this warrior who couldn't stop practicing, who treated every moment as an opportunity to improve. She developed relationships with troops she trained alongside, bonds forged through shared struggle and mutual support. A giant who tanked for her during drills, letting her practice safe positioning behind friendly frontline. A group of archers who coordinate with her, learning how to combine traditional and explosive damage. These early partnerships taught her about team dynamics, about how individual excellence meant little without coordination. The training officers began using her as an example for other troops learning new roles. "Watch how she approaches each problem systematically," they'd say. "Notice how she learns from every failure, adjusts her technique, tries again with modifications." She became a case study in effective learning, proof that dedication and intelligent practice could overcome initial incompetence. But not everything was struggle and training. There were moments of levity, of humor, of the camaraderie that develops among warriors who face danger together. Friendly competitions to see who could hit the most challenging targets. Jokes about her recoil slides, reenactments that exaggerated the stumbling of her early attempts. Stories shared over meals about memorable battles, near misses, spectacular successes, and equally spectacular failures. The equipment evolved alongside her skills. Her original launcher was replaced multiple times as she learned what worked and what didn't. Each iteration incorporated lessons from use, became more refined, more efficient, more suited to her specific needs and style. The rockets themselves went through versions, different powder mixtures, different casing designs, constant optimization seeking that perfect balance of damage and reliability. Mentorship played a crucial role. Veteran troops who'd mastered their own unconventional approaches would offer advice, share wisdom from their journeys. The wizard, whose area damage attacks shared some properties with her shrapnel spread, explained concepts of targeting priority in group scenarios. The bomber, another troop that embraced explosive force, discussed the psychology of using weapons that enemies feared. Months passed. Seasons changed. The Firecracker, who entered training as a rough beginner, gradually transformed into a competent warrior, then into an accomplished specialist, finally into someone who could be genuinely called an expert. Her accuracy became reliable enough that she rarely missed unless circumstances were truly chaotic. Her recoil management became so smooth it looked choreographed. Her understanding of shrapnel patterns became so comprehensive she could improvise solutions to unusual tactical problems. The transformation wasn't just technical. Her confidence grew, not the brittle overconfidence of someone who thinks they've mastered everything, but the solid confidence of someone who knows their capabilities and limitations. She developed judgment, the ability to assess situations quickly and decide optimal responses. She learned patience, understanding when to fire immediately versus when to wait for better positioning or more targets. By the time she was deemed ready for full deployment, for selection into player decks and usage in competitive scenarios, she'd logged thousands of practice shots, hundreds of training battles, countless hours of study and analysis. She'd earned her place through work that most observers never saw, through dedication that persisted through discouragement and setback. The Firecracker players encountered in the arena was the finished product, but that finish was built on a foundation of training days that tested her thoroughly. The evolution journey. The evolution system came to Clash Royale much later in the Firecracker story, arriving in June 2023 alongside Season 47 titled Evolution. This wasn't just a power increase or a simple upgrade. Evolution represented transformation, change at a fundamental level, the emergence of something that had always been possible but required the right conditions to manifest. For months before the Evolution feature launched, the Firecracker had been exactly what she was, a powerful but straightforward troop with well-understood mechanics and clear role. She'd seen balance adjustments, meta shifts, periods of high usage, and times when other options were preferred. But the core identity remained stable, unchanged. Evolution would break that stability, would offer a path to something new. The process of evolution isn't simple or automatic. It requires resources, dedication, specific cards collected and gold spent. In game terms, this represents the arena's recognition that certain troops have the potential for growth beyond their initial parameters. In story terms, it represents the warrior's personal journey towards self-improvement, the decision to push beyond comfortable competence into uncertain territory where greater power awaits. The evolved Firecracker emerges from this process changed in multiple ways. Visually, she's distinct. The navy and gray-colored tunic replaces her traditional appearance, marked with the evolution symbol that declares her transformed status. The indigo coloring throughout creates a more dramatic, powerful aesthetic. The golden fuse on her rocket catches light, promises enhanced performance, warns enemies that this isn't the firecracker they might be used to facing. But the visual changes merely reflect deeper transformation. Her statistics improve significantly. Hit points increase from 237 at level 11 to 334, making her substantially more durable. She can survive interactions that would have eliminated her before, can absorb more incidental damage while continuing to provide value. This increased survivability changes how she can be deployed, expands her tactical flexibility, makes her more forgiving of positioning errors. Her damage scales up correspondingly. The main rocket damage jumps from 163 to 230, while shrapnel damage increases from 92 to 130. These aren't marginal improvements. They're substantial increases that change breakpoints, alter what she can effectively eliminate, give her more immediate impact per shot. But the spark ability is what truly defines the evolution. Every fourth shot triggers an automatic extra rocket at a random target. This happens without additional loading time, without aiming, just a sudden bonus attack that adds damage and splash effect to whatever she was already doing. The randomness prevents it from being too easily exploitable, keeps it from being overpowered. But over the course of a battle, these extra sparks add up to significant value. The spark creates interesting psychological dynamics in matches. Opponents must account for this periodic bonus damage. Can't simply calculate value based on her base attack cycle. It adds unpredictability, keeps enemy players slightly off balance, creates moments where her contribution exceeds what careful analysis would suggest is possible. This psychological pressure is itself valuable, forcing opponents to dedicate more resources to dealing with her than her base stats alone would justify. Achieving evolution represents commitment. Players must invest heavily in this specific card, prioritizing it above other options that could also provide power increases. This creates meaningful choice, forces decisions about resource allocation, ensures that evolved troops feel special rather than common. When you face an evolved Firecracker, you know the opponent has deliberately chosen to invest in this card, values it highly enough to dedicate scarce resources. The evolution journey isn't just mechanical. It represents character growth, personal development, the natural progression of someone who's mastered fundamentals and now pushes toward excellence. The base Firecracker is skilled, effective, dangerous. The evolved version is all of these things amplified, refined, taken to a higher level through dedication and effort. In narrative terms, we might imagine the evolution happening gradually. The Firecracker, having fought countless battles, begins to notice patterns others miss. Her instincts sharpen. Her techniques become more efficient. Small optimizations compound over time. She experiments with new powder mixtures for her rockets, finding combinations that produce more force without increasing weight. She refines her launcher design, incorporating lessons from years of use. The spark ability could represent her achieving a form of flow state, Moments where her expertise becomes so complete that she acts without conscious thought. Every fourth shot, she is so completely in rhythm with her weapon that an extra rocket fires almost as an extension of will, rather than deliberate action. It's the kind of mastery that comes only from absolute dedication, from pushing past the point where most people would be satisfied with good enough. Other troops notice the change. The evolved Firecracker carries herself differently, moves with a confidence that goes beyond mere competence into true mastery. Her slides are smoother, her recovery faster, her aim more precise even in chaotic conditions. When she fires, there's an intensity to the explosions that wasn't there before, a power that declares she's operating at a level beyond normal parameters. The evolution also represents choice in another sense. Not every Firecracker will evolve. Not every warrior will push themselves to this level. It's easier to remain competent, to stay within comfortable boundaries, to not risk the effort and potential failure that comes with striving for more. Evolution requires hunger for improvement, willingness to leave behind what's safe and known, courage to pursue potential even when the path is uncertain. In battles, the evolved Firecracker becomes a priority target. Opponents recognize the threat, understand that leaving her active for extended periods allows those spark abilities to accumulate massive value. She draws spell responses more readily, demands more attention, forces opponents to adjust their entire game plan to account for her presence. This attention is itself validation, proof that the evolution represents genuine power increase rather than cosmetic change. The competitive scene embraced evolved Firecracker quickly. Professional players recognized her enhanced capabilities, began featuring her in high-level tournament decks. The combination of improved survivability, increased damage, and the spark ability created a package that excelled in the right contexts. Meta discussions included her prominently, analyzing optimal use cases, best supporting cards, strategies to maximize her unique properties. But evolution also introduced new skill requirements. The evolved Firecracker's increased power came with increased importance of proper usage. Mistakes hurt more because more resources were invested. Improper positioning that wasted her potential felt worse because the opportunity cost was higher. Players had to rise to her level, had to use her with precision that matched her refined capabilities. The gold fuse on her rocket became iconic, a visual shorthand for "this is serious." When opponents see that golden gleam, they know they're facing someone who's invested heavily, someone who's made this card a cornerstone of their strategy. It's a warning and a challenge simultaneously, daring enemies to try to overcome this enhanced threat. Through the evolution system, the Firecracker's journey comes full circle. She started as someone willing to abandon tradition for something new. She mastered that new approach through dedication and practice. And now, through evolution, she's pushed even further, transcended her own previous limits, become something that exceeds her original design. Its growth made manifest, potential realized, the natural endpoint of a journey that began with a simple question: what if I tried something different? The evolved Firecracker stands as proof that excellence is a journey without final destination. You can always improve, always refine, always push toward better execution of your craft. The transformation isn't just about statistics or abilities. It's about becoming the fullest version of yourself, about realizing potential that was always there but needed effort and dedication to manifest. She evolved not because the system allowed it, but because she earned it. Strategic mind and tactical brilliance. Let's talk about the mind behind the explosions. Because the Firecracker isn't just someone who fires rockets indiscriminately. She's a tactical thinker, a student of battlefield geometry, someone who understands arena dynamics at a level most troops never reach. Her weapon might be loud and flashy, but her approach to using it is calculated and precise. Understanding positioning is the foundation of Firecracker mastery. Unlike troops that can be placed almost anywhere and provide roughly similar value, her effectiveness varies wildly based on deployment location. 3 tiles too far forward, and she's vulnerable to quick elimination. 2 tiles too far back, and she can't reach crucial targets. Slight angular differences determine whether shrapnel hits additional enemies or activates your own king tower. She's learned to read the arena like a 3-dimensional map, seeing not just the current state but potential future states. Where will enemies move? What paths will they take? Where will clashes occur? Her positioning decisions account for all of this, placing herself where she'll provide maximum value over the next 10 to 15 seconds rather than just the current moment. Range awareness is crucial. Her 6.5 tile range means she can hit things most troops can't, but it also means she must respect threats that outrange her. The princess, the magic archer, certain buildings, all of these can hit her while she can't effectively return fire. She's learned which matchups require positioning adjustments, when to hang back versus when she can be more aggressive. The recoil mechanic creates unique tactical opportunities. Every shot moves her backward, which most troops would consider a disadvantage. But the Firecracker has learned to use this. She positions herself such that recoil moves her towards safety rather than into danger. She times shots to slide away from approaching melee troops. She uses terrain features, positioning near edges or obstacles that will limit or redirect her slide in predictable ways. Against swarm strategies, she's devastating when used correctly. Skeleton army, goblin gang, minion horde, all of these suffer massively from her shrapnel spread. But timing matters enormously. Fire too early and the swarm hasn't fully deployed, limiting how many targets you hit. Fire too late and they've already dealt damage or overwhelmed your defenses. She's learned to recognize the exact moment of maximum vulnerability, when enemies are grouped, but not yet scattered. Target selection follows complex decision trees. Primary target is obvious in simple scenarios, but what about when there are multiple threats? Does she focus the tanky troop in front, dealing consistent damage? Or does she target the support units behind, eliminating threats that deal more damage over time? The answer varies based on context, available elixir, what other friendly troops are present, dozens of variables that she processes almost instantly. Defensive applications showcase her tactical intelligence most clearly. When opponents push one lane heavily, the instinct is to drop defensive troops directly in their path. But the Firecracker has learned more sophisticated approaches. She positions at angles, creating crossfire situations where her shrapnel hits the entire push, while she remains out of immediate danger. She uses the Princess Tower itself as a shield, staying just far enough back that enemies must commit deeply to reach her. She's mastered the art of the defensive counterpush. After eliminating or severely damaging an enemy offensive, she's often left standing with good health. Rather than waiting or wandering, she immediately transitions to offense, marching down the lane she just defended. This tempo advantage, forcing opponents to immediately respond to her threat while they're low on elixir from their failed push, creates winning situations from what were defensive necessities. Against air troops, her value becomes obvious. Many ground-focused defenses struggle with aerial threats, but the Firecracker handles them naturally. Minions, Mega Minion, Baby Dragon, all of these take significant damage from her rockets and shrapnel. She's learned the timing required to hit fast-moving air units, leading her shots just enough that the rocket intercepts their path. Spell baiting is part of her strategic toolkit. Opponents often hold spells specifically to counter her, knowing she's vulnerable to arrows or fireball. She's learned to leverage this, positioning herself in ways that make spell usage uncomfortable. Force the opponent to choose between hitting her and hitting other valuable targets. Make them waste high elixir spells on a 3 elixir troop. Create situations where not using a spell allows her to generate more value than the spell would prevent. The King Tower activation vulnerability creates a strategic minigame within every match. She must be hyper-aware of tower positioning, of angles that risk activation. But skilled opponents try to exploit this, deliberately placing troops in positions where attacking them might cause shrapnel to arc toward the King Tower. This creates a tactical standoff, where the Firecracker must choose between attacking imperfectly positioned targets or allowing them to generate value unmolested. She's developed counters to common counter strategies. Opponents rushing her with fast melee troops, position behind a mini-tank, or wait until they're committed to a specific path. Spell threats, bait them out with other vulnerable troops first, or positions spread out from other targets. Opponents playing defensively, not giving her good targets. Apply pressure, force them to respond, create the grouping she needs to maximize shrapnel value. Cycle deck strategies showcase her particular brilliance. In fast cycle archetypes, she can be played multiple times in a single battle, each deployment forcing the opponent to respond or accept chip damage. She's learned optimal cycle patterns, when to play her aggressively versus when to save her for defense. The rhythm of deployment becomes a song she knows by heart, each note placed perfectly in the larger composition. In control decks, she serves as area denial. Her presence forces opponents to split pushes, to avoid grouping troops, to play around her shrapnel threat. This disruption is itself valuable, making opponent execution more difficult, creating openings for other defensive tools. She's the piece that makes everything else work better, the multiplier that amplifies teammate effectiveness. Beatdown strategies use her differently, as support behind heavy tanks. The giant or golem absorbs attention while she hammers defenses, her shrapnel clearing counterplay troops. She learned to position just far enough back that she protected but close enough that her rockets reach the action. She times her deployments to match the tank's push timing, ensuring she arrives with enough support to maximize impact. Bridge spam tactics occasionally include her, using her as a surprise offensive element. This isn't her most common role, but in certain matchups, an aggressive Firecracker at the bridge can catch opponents off guard. She's learned which situations favor this risky play, when the potential payoff justifies the vulnerability. Tournament play demands even more sophisticated understanding. Professional opponents know her capabilities intimately, play specifically to counter her, rarely make the grouping mistakes that casual players might. She's had to evolve her own play, develop deeper layers of strategy, think multiple steps ahead. At the highest levels, playing her well is like chess, each move part of larger strategic plans that unfold over the entire match. She studies opponents, learning tendencies and patterns. Does this player favor spells or troop counters? Do they play reactively or proactively? How do they respond to pressure? All of this information informs her positioning and timing, allowing her to exploit individual playstyles rather than just executing generic strategies. Elixir management becomes crucial in her strategic thinking. At 3 elixir, she's cost-effective, but that cost still matters. She's learned when investment is worthwhile versus when it's wasteful. Firing a rocket that deals 50 damage isn't good value. Firing a rocket that eliminates 400 health worth of enemies is excellent value. The difference is positioning and timing, both of which she controls. She's also learned what she can't do, understands her limitations as clearly as her strengths. She can't solo defend heavy tanks without support. She can't quickly eliminate single high-health targets. She struggles against spread-out troops that don't group for shrapnel value. Recognizing these limitations prevents overcommitment, keeps her from being placed in situations where failure is likely. The metagame awareness extends beyond individual matches. She understands which decks are popular, which strategies dominate current competitive play, how her role fits in the larger ecosystem. When spell-heavy decks are common, she adjusts, plays more carefully, recognizes increased risk. When swarm strategies dominate, She knows her value increases, leans into her anti-swarm capabilities. Communication with other troops, while not verbal in any conventional sense, happens through positioning and timing. She signals intentions through where she stands, tells teammates what she plans to attack, coordinates without words. The ice spirit that times its jump to freeze enemies just as her rocket arrives understands this collaboration. The knight that positions the tank while she provides range support has learned this tactical dance. Weather and environmental factors that exist in the arena affect her calculations. Wind, though not mechanically represented in gameplay, would theoretically affect rocket trajectory. She's internalized how to compensate, how to adjust aim to account for conditions. Temperature affects powder burn rates. Humidity impacts propellant performance. These aren't game mechanics, but in the story of who she is, they're details she considers. The strategic mind behind the explosions is what separates good firecracker usage from great firecracker mastery. Anyone can drop her in the back and hope for value. But truly excellent deployment requires understanding dozens of variables, processing complex tactical situations in seconds, making decisions that account for current state and likely futures. She's developed this capability through experience, through countless battles that taught lessons in success and failure. Her tactical brilliance isn't about individual genius or innate talent. It's about dedication to understanding her craft completely. She studied every matchup, analyzed every interaction, practiced until responses become instinctive. The brilliance is earned rather than granted, built through work that most observers never see. When she positions perfectly, hits the ideal target, times her shot to maximize value, it looks effortless. But that appearance of effortlessness is the result of tremendous effort invested beforehand. Relationships in the arena. The arena isn't just a battlefield. It's a community, a collection of personalities forced together by eternal conflict, forming bonds and rivalries, and the complex web of relationships that emerge wherever individuals interact regularly. The Firecracker exists within this social ecosystem. Her connections with other troops revealing dimensions of her character that pure combat analysis might miss. Her relationship with the Knight is one of mutual professional respect. The Knight represents steadfast reliability, a troop that does one thing consistently well without flashiness or complication. He tanks damage, absorbs hits meant for others, creates space for teammates to operate. The Firecracker appreciates this stability, recognizes that her explosive chaos works best when supported by his steady presence. When deployed together, they form a balanced unit, his defense enabling her offense. They don't socialize much outside combat. Their personalities are too different, his stoic pragmatism clashing with her enthusiastic pyromania. But on the battlefield, they understand each other perfectly. The Knight knows the position where her shrapnel won't hit him, trusts her to clear swarms that would otherwise overwhelm him. She knows to let him lead, to use his bulk as cover, to appreciate the protection he provides. It's a professional partnership built on complementary capabilities rather than personal friendship. With the Wizard, there's a different dynamic. He's another troop that deals area damage through destructive force, though his is magical, while hers is chemical. They're colleagues in chaos, both understanding what it means to prefer explosive solutions to careful precision. They talk shop, discuss optimal splash patterns, share stories of massive multi-unit eliminations. There's camaraderie here, a connection between people who see the world similarly. But there's also competition, subtle, usually friendly, but definitely present. Who can clear swarms faster? Whose area damage is more effective? The Wizard points out his longer range, his ability to hit air and ground simultaneously. The Firecracker counters with her lower elixir cost, her forced repositioning that makes her harder to target. Neither definitively wins these arguments because both are right. They're different tools with different strengths. But the discussion itself is enjoyable. a way to engage with someone who understands the appeal of spectacular destruction. The prince's relationship is more complex. They're similar in many ways, both long-range splash damage dealers who pressure opponents and force responses. But the princess predates the Firecracker significantly, was established as the premier range support option before the Firecracker existed. Some see the Firecracker as competition, a threat to the princess's position. The princess herself is more nuanced in her view. She recognizes that the Firecracker fills a different niche, costs less, operates differently despite superficial similarities. But there's awareness too. Awareness that every match where Firecracker is chosen is a match where she wasn't. The relationship is cordial but distant, marked by politeness that doesn't quite reach warmth. They're not enemies, but they're not allies either. They're competitors, operating in adjacent spaces, each aware of the other's presence and accomplishments. With the archers, we've discussed a complicated family dynamic, but there are individual archers who've become genuine friends. One in particular, a young archer who struggled with the same restlessness the Firecracker once felt, seeks her out regularly. They talk about the burden of expectations, about feeling constrained by a role, about wondering if there's something more beyond what you're told you should be. The Firecracker doesn't push her toward explosives, doesn't insist rebellion is necessary. She simply shares her own experience, lets the young archer draw her own conclusions. The giant has become an unexpected friend. You wouldn't think the loud explosion enthusiast and the quiet, gentle giant would have much common ground. But they found connection and shared understanding of being underestimated. The giant is often dismissed as simple, just a tanky health pool without interesting mechanics. The Firecracker is sometimes seen as a gimmick, all flash without substance. Both know they're more than these reductive views. That shared experience of being underestimated creates bond. They spend quiet evenings together when the arena allows it. The giant doesn't talk much, but his presence is comforting. The Firecracker finds she doesn't need to perform around him, can set aside the manic energy she projects in battle. She can be tired, uncertain, quietly contemplative. He accepts all of this without judgment, his steady calm creating safe space for authenticity. The goblins fascinate and frustrate her in equal measure. Their chaotic energy mirrors her love of explosive chaos, but their lack of discipline goes against her precise execution. Their destruction without control, randomness without purpose. She's tried to teach them about proper explosive usage, about timing and positioning. They listen enthusiastically, then immediately ignore everything she said and charge in screaming. It's endearing and exasperating simultaneously, but they make her laugh, which is valuable in its own right. Their antics, their complete disregard for conventional strategy, their ability to find joy in every situation regardless of outcome. All of this reminds her not to take everything so seriously. The goblins live purely in the moment, caring only about the current experience without worrying about optimization or improvement. It's a perspective she finds difficult to adopt, but increasingly recognizes has value. The P.E.K.K.A. relationship is interesting because of the shared naming connection to Mini P.E.K.K.A., despite them being completely unrelated to her. People sometimes confuse the lineages, assume the Firecracker trained alongside, or has some connection to the P.E.K.K.A. family. She doesn't, but she's befriended several of them anyway. They're quiet warriors with surprising depth, deadly in combat but thoughtful in downtime. She's learned not to judge based on appearance or reputation, to look past the armor and find the person inside. With the baby dragon, there's mutual appreciation based on shared enjoyment of fire. The dragon breathes it constantly, uses it as primary weapon. The Firecracker creates it through explosives, worships the moment of combustion. They've spent hours discussing fire's properties, its beauty, its power. The dragon shares knowledge about natural fire, about biological flame production. The Firecracker explains chemical combustion, the science of controlled explosions. Both learn from the other. expanding their understanding through shared passion. The skeletons are sources of consistent amusement. They're individually fragile, easily destroyed, but keep coming back with inexhaustible enthusiasm. The Firecracker's rockets can eliminate entire skeleton groups in single shots, which should make them enemies. Instead, they seem to respect her effectiveness, treating her like some kind of explosion deity. They gather to watch her practice, their bone hands clacking together in applause after particularly good shots. She finds their admiration somewhat baffling but also touching. The royal recruits represent a complicated relationship. They're disciplined, traditional, everything she diverged from when choosing explosives. They sometimes express disapproval of her methods, suggest her approach lacks the dignity that proper warriors should maintain. She ignores most of this criticism, secure enough in her choices not to need their validation. But it still stings occasionally, reminds her that not everyone will understand or approve of the path she's chosen. With the evolved troops, there's a sense of shared understanding. Evolution requires dedication, commitment to improvement, willingness to push beyond initial parameters. Regardless of which specific troops have achieved evolution, they've all walked similar paths. They've all made the choice to strive for more, invested resources and effort into transformation. This creates kinship, a bond between those who refuse to accept good enough as an endpoint. The Firecracker has also developed relationships with some of the Clash of Clans troops who share the arena occasionally. When she was added to Clash of Clans in April 2024, becoming available in that game's builder base, she met versions of herself operating in different contexts. These interactions are strange, like meeting alternate timeline versions of yourself. They're her, but also not her, shaped by different experiences and environments. The conversations are disorienting but fascinating. Healers and support troops appreciate her differently than damage dealers do. She can clear threats that would otherwise overwhelm healing capabilities, can eliminate swarms before they reach targets that need protecting. This makes her valuable to support-oriented troops who might otherwise struggle against certain strategies. The Heal Spirit, the Ice Spirit, various supporting elements have learned to coordinate with her, timing their abilities to maximize her effectiveness. There are also troops she doesn't get along with. Personalities that clash, playstyles that conflict, philosophies about combat that contradict too sharply. These aren't enemies exactly, but they're not friends either. They avoid each other when possible, interact professionally when necessary, maintain distance that prevents friction from becoming open conflict. The relationships extend beyond troops to structures and spells. The cannon appreciates her anti-swarm capabilities, recognizes that she handles threats it struggles with. The arrow spell has mixed feelings, knowing it's often chosen specifically to counter her. The fireball considers her something like a spiritual cousin, both creating explosive force, though, through different mechanisms. In the end, the Firecracker exists within a rich social tapestry. She's not isolated, not alone despite her unconventional path. She's found her people, built connections based on mutual respect and shared experiences. Some relationships are deep, others superficial. Some are built on friendship, others pure professional cooperation. But together, they make the arena feel like more than just a battlefield. They make it feel like a community, a place where even someone who chose explosives over tradition can find belonging. Balance through time. The Firecracker's existence in Clash Royale hasn't been static. Since her release in February 2020, she's been adjusted repeatedly through balance updates. Each change reflecting developers' ongoing efforts to keep the game healthy and engaging. Understanding these changes tells us not just about game balance, but about how a character evolves through feedback and observation. At release, her statistics were carefully calibrated based on internal testing. But no amount of internal testing can fully predict how millions of players will use a card. Within days, usage patterns emerged that surprised the development team. She was being deployed in ways they hadn't anticipated, creating value in scenarios they hadn't specifically tested. The data poured in, informing future decisions. The first major balance change came relatively quickly. Players had discovered optimal placements and strategies, and her usage rate climbed higher than intended. In March 2020, just over a month after release, she received her first nerf. Hit points decreased by 6%, from 244 to 230. This wasn't devastating, but it was meaningful. Interactions that she previously survived would now eliminate her. Players had to adjust, playing slightly more carefully. The nerf was controversial. Players who'd invested in upgrading her felt betrayed, argued that they'd allocated resources based on her initial power level. Others insisted she'd been too strong, that the adjustment was necessary for game health. The debate raged across forums and social media, passionate arguments from all perspectives. The Firecracker had become important enough that changes to her sparked genuine emotional responses. But more adjustments would come. In June 2020, she received a buff, hit points increasing back to 237. Not quite back to her original value, but higher than the post-nerf level. This represented developers acknowledging that perhaps the initial nerf went slightly too far, that she needed a bit more survivability to function optimally. The community response was more muted this time, most players seeing it as reasonable correction. Then came a significant rework in September 2020. Her range was reduced from 6 to 5 tiles, a massive 20% decrease. This fundamentally changed how she could be deployed, reduced her safety zone, made her more vulnerable to counterplay. But to compensate, her damage increased slightly. The developers were adjusting her power budget, shifting strength from range to damage output. This change sparked major discussion. Was she better or worse now? The answer depended on playstyle and deck archetype. Players who'd used her for chip damage from extreme safety found her less effective. Those who deployed her more aggressively, using her as active defense, found the damage buff helpful despite the range reduction. Usage rates dropped initially as players adjusted to the new parameters. Over the following months, she received minor tweaks. Damage adjustments of 2 or 3%, small enough that casual players might not notice, but significant enough to affect high-level interactions. These micro-adjustments represented the developer's commitment to ongoing optimization, continuously refining based on accumulating data. The competitive scene's relationship with the Firecracker fluctuated with these changes. When she was strong, professional players featured her heavily, building decks around her capabilities. When nerfs reduced her power, she'd disappear from tournament play for weeks or months, replaced by alternatives that offered better value at her elixir cost. Her presence in the meta became a barometer for her current balance state. In November 2021, she received another significant adjustment. Hit speed changed from 3 seconds to 3.1 seconds, a small increase that reduced her overall damage output over time. This was targeted at her defensive value, making her slightly less effective at handling sustained pushes. Players had to adapt again, finding new rhythms that accommodated the longer interval between shots. The Evolution update in June 2023 added complexity to balance discussions. Now there were effectively 2 versions of the Firecracker to consider, the base version and the evolved version. The evolved version's introduction was carefully monitored, with developers watching usage rates and win rates to ensure she was strong but not oppressively so. The Spark ability added a new variable, periodic bonus damage that made her output less predictable. Balance changes weren't just about numbers. They reflected changing philosophies about what role the Firecracker should fill. Early in her life, she was positioned as a versatile support option with defensive and offensive applications. Later adjustments pushed her toward more specialized roles, reducing general applicability but increasing effectiveness in specific scenarios. The community developed increasingly sophisticated understanding of her balance state. Players created detailed spreadsheets tracking her statistics across updates, calculated exact breakpoints that determined which interactions changed with each adjustment. Content creators produced videos analyzing every balance change, explaining implications, and recommending strategic adaptations. Through all these changes, the Firecracker's core identity remained intact. She was always the rocket-wielding explosion enthusiast with recoil slides and shrapnel spread. The mechanical foundation never changed, even as the specific numbers varied. This consistency allowed players to maintain familiarity, even through balance volatility, to transfer learned skills across updates despite adjustments. Some changes felt more justified than others. When her usage rate climbed above 40%, indicating she was present in nearly half of all decks, nerfs made sense even to players who loved using her. When she disappeared from competitive play for months, sitting below 2% usage in tournaments, buffs felt necessary to bring her back to relevance. The goal was always balance, ensuring she was viable without being mandatory. The balance journey taught players important lessons about game design. Perfect balance is impossible when you have over 100 cards with complex interactions. The goal isn't perfection, but rather an acceptable range, ensuring every card has situations where it excels without any card dominating all scenarios. The Firecracker's fluctuating power level demonstrated this principle clearly. She became a case study in how to balance area damage troops. Too much health, and she becomes impossible to remove efficiently. Too little, and she dies before providing value. Too much damage, and she eliminates everything. Too little, and she can't fulfill her role. Too much range, and she's unfair. Too little, and she's vulnerable. Finding the sweet spot required extensive iteration. The balance changes also revealed player adaptation capabilities. Each nerf or buff would be followed by predictions of disaster, claims that the card was ruined or broken. But within weeks, players would find new ways to use her effectively, would optimize strategies around the new parameters. The community's ability to adapt often exceeded developers' expectations, demonstrating remarkable flexibility and creativity. Looking at the complete history of balance changes tells a story of refinement. The Firecracker that exists today is different from her release version in dozens of small ways. Each change was a lesson learned, a data point processed, an attempt to move closer to that elusive ideal balance state. She's been stronger and weaker at various points, but she's always remained interesting, always retained the core appeal that made players excited about her in the first place. The balance journey isn't over. Future updates will continue adjusting her, tweaking numbers based on current meta and ongoing data collection. She'll be buffed when weak, nerfed when too strong, hopefully maintaining residence in that zone of balanced effectiveness. The Firecracker, who exists a year from now, will likely have slightly different statistics than today, continuing the evolution that's been ongoing since her release. Through all the changes, she survived. Troops that are poorly designed or don't fit the game's needs eventually disappear from relevance, becoming historical curiosities that no one uses. The Firecracker has remained relevant despite balance volatility, proving that her core design is sound, that she fills genuine strategic needs. The changes refined her without destroying her, polished without removing the essential character that makes her special. The art of controlled chaos. There's a philosophy underlying everything the Firecracker does, a way of seeing the world that justifies her choices and explains her appeal. It's the art of controlled chaos, the discipline of managing explosive force, the understanding that destruction can be beautiful when executed with precision and purpose. This philosophy extends beyond just combat tactics into a complete worldview. Chaos, in its pure form, is randomness without meaning. It's events occurring without pattern or purpose, outcomes that can't be predicted or influenced. Most people fear chaos, see it as the opposite of order, and therefore something to be eliminated or constrained. They build systems to prevent chaos, create structures that impose predictability on an uncertain world. But the Firecracker sees differently. She recognizes that chaos isn't inherently bad. It's energy, potential, possibility. It's the raw material from which new patterns can emerge. The problem isn't chaos itself, but uncontrolled chaos, randomness that serves no purpose and creates no value. What she's learned to do is take that chaotic potential and shape it, direct it, make it serve deliberate objectives. Every explosion is controlled chaos. The chemical reactions that produce explosive force are fundamentally chaotic at the molecular level. Trillions of atoms interacting in ways that are individually unpredictable. But in aggregate, with proper containment and direction, these chaotic reactions produce predictable results. The rocket flies straight. The explosion occurs where intended. The shrapnel spreads in the calculated pattern. This is the core of her philosophy. You don't eliminate chaos. You channel it. You create conditions where chaotic energy follows paths you've designed, produces outcomes you've selected. The control isn't absolute, can never be absolute, but it's sufficient. The explosion will never be perfectly identical twice, but it will always be effective. Her approach contrasts sharply with troops like the archers or musketeer, who rely on absolute precision. For them, success means hitting exactly what you aim at exactly when you intend to. There's no room for variation, no acceptance of unpredictability. The Firecracker has learned to work with variation, to accept that some elements will always be outside perfect control, while ensuring the overall outcome aligns with objectives. This philosophy extends to how she thinks about battle itself. Perfect execution is impossible in the arena's chaos. Opponents make unexpected plays. Elixir counts fluctuate unpredictably. Latency affects timing. 1,000 small factors combine to create situations that can't be perfectly planned for. Troops that require perfect execution struggle with this reality. The Firecracker has built flexibility into her approach, accepting that adaptation matters more than perfection. When things go wrong, when a shot misses or positioning proves suboptimal, she doesn't panic. She adjusts. Every explosion is information, feedback about current conditions. A rocket that detonates short of the intended target tells her about spacing and timing. Shrapnel that doesn't hit secondary targets informs future positioning. She treats mistakes as data rather than failures, constantly refining her understanding through experience. There's beauty in the explosion itself, independent of tactical effectiveness. The Firecracker has learned to appreciate the aesthetic dimension of what she does. The colors in the blast, the way light and shadow play against smoke, the brief instant where force becomes visible. Other troops might perform their roles mechanically, seeing combat as task rather than art. She sees every detonation as a small masterpiece, brief but genuine. This appreciation isn't distraction from tactical purpose. It's integration of aesthetic experience with functional execution. She fights more effectively because she loves what she does, because the explosions bring her joy even in the midst of combat stress. The enthusiasm isn't liability. It's the fuel that powers sustained excellence, the reason she can practice endlessly without boredom. The controlled chaos philosophy also informs her teaching. When helping other troops improve, she doesn't demand they eliminate all uncertainty from their approach. Instead, she teaches them to identify which uncertainties matter and which don't, to focus control efforts where they'll have maximum impact while accepting that some elements will always vary. This creates more resilient warriors, soldiers who function effectively even when conditions aren't perfect. She's learned that trying to control everything is exhausting and ultimately futile. The arena is too complex, has too many variables, involves too many independent actors. Attempting perfect control burns out those who try. leads to frustration when reality inevitably deviates from plan. Better to control the controllable while gracefully accepting the existence of elements beyond control. This philosophy has made her surprisingly philosophical for someone whose primary skill involves blowing things up. She thinks deeply about the nature of control and freedom, about how constraints actually enable creativity rather than limiting it. A rocket launcher constrains her options severely compared to troops with more versatile abilities. But within those constraints, she's found enormous room for expression and optimization. She sees parallels between her explosives and life in the arena generally. Everyone is constrained by their role, their statistics, their designed purpose. But within those constraints exists choice. How you approach your role, what attitude you bring to combat, how you interact with teammates, all of this remains under individual control. The Firecracker chose to find joy in explosions, to see beauty in destruction. That choice colors everything else, transforms obligation into passion. Other troops have adopted elements of her philosophy. The bomber, who shares her love of explosive force, has learned from her about finding purpose in chaos. The Valkyrie, whose spinning attack creates its own kind of controlled chaos, recognizes a kindred spirit. Even troops without obvious connections to chaos have taken inspiration from her approach, learning that acceptance of uncertainty can lead to better outcomes than rigid demands for perfect control. The philosophy also extends to how she handles failure. Losses happen. Poor deployments waste elixir. Opponents outplay her. These outcomes are inevitable in a competitive environment. She doesn't catastrophize failure or see it as proof of inadequacy. It's just information, data about what didn't work, guidance for future adjustments. The controlled chaos mindset treats failure as part of the process rather than deviation from it. There's wisdom in accepting that you can't control outcomes, only your approach to pursuing them. She can't guarantee her rockets will always find targets, can't ensure opponents won't have perfect counters, can't prevent spell eliminations. But she can control her positioning, her timing, her decisions about when to engage and when to retreat. Focusing on the controllable while accepting the uncontrollable creates a sustainable approach to competition. This philosophy is why she's remained effective through balance changes. When developers adjusted her range or damage or health, she adapted. She didn't demand the game conform to her preferences. She assessed the new parameters and figured out optimal strategies within them. The controlled chaos approach is inherently flexible, built on adaptation rather than rigid optimization. In quiet moments, she sometimes articulates these ideas to troops who ask about her mindset. Embrace the explosion, she tells them. Control what you can, accept what you can't. Find beauty in both. It's simple advice, but it contains layers of meaning that reveal themselves through experience. The chaos isn't the enemy. Resistance to chaos is what creates suffering. Acceptance and direction of chaos creates artistry. The Firecracker's art isn't just about technique or tactics. It's about approaching existence in the arena with a specific mindset, one that finds purpose in uncertainty and beauty in destruction. She's turned explosive force into a personal philosophy, a way of navigating the world that acknowledges chaos while refusing to be overwhelmed by it. And in doing so, she's become not just an effective warrior, but a complete being, someone whose external actions reflect internal understanding, legacy, and cultural impact. The Firecracker's influence extends far beyond her role as a playable card. She's become a cultural phenomenon within the Clash Royale community, inspiring art, discussion, strategy innovation, and genuine affection from players worldwide. Understanding her legacy means examining how a fictional character can become meaningful to real people. Her release generated immediate excitement, but the sustained community engagement that followed was what established her as truly significant. Within weeks of becoming available, fan artists began producing illustrations. The distinctive visual design, with the rocket launcher and team-colored headband, proved immediately recognizable and fun to draw. Artists experimented with different styles, from realistic renderings to cute chibi versions to dramatic action scenes. The art community embraced her enthusiastically. Social media platforms filled with Firecracker illustrations, each artist bringing their own interpretation while maintaining the core identity. Some emphasize the explosive chaos she creates, surrounding her with fire and shrapnel. Others focused on her personality, capturing that manic glee she seems to embody. The volume and quality of fan art indicated genuine affection, players expressing appreciation through creative effort. Memes emerged naturally, as they do with any popular character. The recoil slide became a running joke, with players creating humorous content about her constant backward movement. Firecracker activating King Tower became shorthand for spectacular self-sabotage in any context. Her pyromaniac tendencies inspired jokes about everything being solved with explosions. These memes, while playful, indicated cultural penetration. She'd become significant enough that referencing her communicated meaning within the community. Strategy content creators made her a frequent subject. YouTube videos analyzing her mechanics, explaining optimal placements, showcasing high-level gameplay. Deck guides featuring her prominently, with detailed explanations of supporting cards and strategic approaches. These resources help players improve their Firecracker usage while also spreading awareness of her capabilities to those who had untried her extensively. Competitive players pushed her limits, discovering interactions and techniques that casual players might never find. The precision positioning required to avoid King Tower activation became a skill that separated good players from great ones. Tournament broadcasts would feature casters excitedly narrating excellent Firecracker plays, recognizing that executing her well-required genuine skill. She became a marker of player skill level, someone that novices struggled with but experts made look easy. The crossover to Clash of Clans in April 2024 expanded her reach significantly. Players who'd never touched Clash Royale suddenly encountered her in Builder Base, learning about this explosive warrior through a different game entirely. The Clash of Clans community had its own reactions, with some embracing her enthusiastically, while others questioned whether she fit that game's established aesthetic. But her presence in both main Clash titles elevated her status within the broader Supercell ecosystem. Community tournaments often featured her prominently. Players would build entire strategies around her capabilities, constructing decks that maximized her value. Watching high-level Firecracker play became entertainment for spectators, appreciating the precision and strategic depth required for optimal usage. She contributed to the spectator appeal of competitive Clash Royale, creating memorable moments that viewers would discuss and replay. The character resonated particularly strongly with players who identified with her divergence from tradition. Those who felt constrained by expectations, who wanted to pursue unconventional paths, saw something of themselves in her choice to abandon archery for explosives. She became almost an inspirational figure, proof that you could reject the default path and forge your own identity. Merchandise featuring the Firecracker appeared in various forms. Official Supercell products included her among other popular troops. Fan-made items proliferated, from custom phone cases to artwork prints to handcrafted figures. The willingness of fans to spend money on Firecracker-related items indicated genuine affection beyond just gameplay appreciation. Her inclusion in special events and challenges gave players regular opportunities to engage with her specifically. Limited time modes that featured her prominently, draft challenges where selecting her was often strategic priority, seasonal events with Firecracker-themed rewards. These kept her relevant and visible, even during periods when meta shifts might have reduced her general usage. The balance change discussions surrounding her became events in themselves. When nerfs were announced, the community would debate their necessity and impact for days. When buffs came, players would theorize about whether they'd be sufficient to bring her back to competitive viability. These discussions engaged thousands of players, creating shared experiences around a fictional character's numerical adjustments. Content creators who specialized in Firecracker strategies developed their own followings. Players known for exceptional Firecracker mastery became minor celebrities within the community, their gameplay studied by others seeking to improve. Tutorial videos from these experts would accumulate millions of views, indicating widespread interest in learning optimal Firecracker techniques. She became associated with skill expression, a card that rewarded mastery and punished carelessness. The community developed a collective knowledge base about her, information that was shared and refined through countless discussions. Which interaction she won, which she lost, optimal timing for various scenarios, positioning tricks that maximize value while minimizing risk. This knowledge wasn't officially documented anywhere. It emerged organically through player experimentation and community sharing, becoming folklore passed between players. New players often receive Firecracker advice from veterans. Watch out for King Tower activation was perhaps the most common warning, a lesson so important it became almost ritualistic to mention it. The experienced players remembered their own mistakes, the painful lessons learned through activating their own King Tower at crucial moments. They wanted to spare newcomers that frustration, to fast-track them past the most common pitfall. The Firecracker's popularity remained remarkably consistent over her lifespan. Unlike some troops that surge in usage when strong and disappear when nerfed, she maintained a dedicated player base regardless of balance state. Some players simply enjoyed her playstyle so much that they continued using her even when other options might have been objectively superior. This loyalty indicated she transcended pure power level to become genuinely beloved. Cultural impact extended into language. Firecrackering became a verb in some community circles, referring to the specific act of clearing grouped enemies with area damage. Doing a firecracker meant accidentally benefiting your opponent through careless play, referencing the King Tower activation issue. These linguistic innovations show she'd become embedded enough in community consciousness to influence how players communicated. The anniversary of her release became a minor community celebration. Players would share memories of when she was introduced, discuss how she changed over time, post their favorite Firecracker moments. It wasn't an official event, just organic community recognition that this character's arrival had been meaningful enough to remember and mark. Supercell's own promotional materials increasingly featured her. Trailer thumbnails, loading screens, social media posts, all made use of her distinctive visual design. The company recognized her popularity and leveraged it for marketing purposes. She became one of the face characters of Clash Royale, instantly recognizable even to people who didn't play the game regularly. The legacy also includes her influence on subsequent card design. Supercell learned lessons from the Firecracker's success and challenges. Future troops with recoil mechanics or complex positioning requirements were designed with her as a reference point, either emulating what worked or avoiding what proved problematic. She became a design touchstone, an example that developers would reference when creating new content. Educational content about game design principles often used her as a case study. How to create a character with clear strengths and weaknesses. How to balance high skill ceiling with accessibility. How to give a common rarity card legendary-worthy distinctiveness. Game design students and aspiring developers studied the Firecracker as an example of effective character creation. The community's protective attitude toward her was telling. When balance changes threatened to fundamentally alter her identity, players spoke up vocally. They didn't just want her to be strong. They wanted her to remain recognizable as the Firecracker they'd come to know. The recoil slide, the shrapnel spread, the King Tower vulnerability. All of these were seen as essential to her character rather than just mechanics that could be changed arbitrarily. Her legacy is also in the players she inspired to improve. Countless individuals who struggled with her initially but persisted eventually mastering her through practice and dedication. These personal growth stories, while not officially documented, represent her real impact. She made players better at the game, taught them about positioning and timing and risk management in ways that transferred to other cards and strategies. The Firecracker proved that common rarity didn't mean common impact. In many games, the rarest items or characters received the most attention and affection. But she demonstrated that smart design and strong identity could make even an easily obtained card feel special. Every player had access to her, but mastering her was something that separated casual users from dedicated practitioners. Looking forward, her legacy continues evolving. New players discover her constantly, go through their own learning processes, develop their own relationships with the character. Veterans accumulate more memories, more perfect plays, and spectacular failures to add to their collections. She's not a static piece of gaming history. She's a living part of an ongoing game, continuing to create new stories and meaningful moments. The cultural impact of the Firecracker ultimately comes down to this. She matters to people. Not just as a gameplay tool, though she certainly functions as that, but as a character, a personality, something that engaged imaginations and earned genuine affection. In the vast landscape of video game characters, most are forgotten quickly after their initial novelty fades. The Firecracker endured, became beloved, earned a permanent place in Clash Royale's cultural fabric. That's a legacy worth recognizing. Dreams of a pyromaniac. What does the Firecracker dream about when she's not in battle? What fills her thoughts during those quiet hours between deployments, when the arena sleeps and warriors have time to be something other than their combat roles? Understanding her inner life, her aspirations and hopes and private thoughts completes the picture of who she truly is. She dreams of the perfect explosion. Not just effective or powerful, but aesthetically perfect. Every variable aligned precisely, creating a detonation that's beautiful in its symmetry and force. She's never quite achieved this ideal. Every explosion has been slightly asymmetric, slightly unpredictable in some small way. But the pursuit of perfection drives her, gives her something to strive toward, even knowing it may be impossible to fully reach. In these dreams, the perfect explosion isn't measured in damage numbers or tactical effectiveness. It's measured in beauty. The way light refracts through the expanding gases, the pattern formed by shrapnel distribution, the sound wave that carries just the right combination of frequencies. She imagines standing witness to this perfect detonation, seeing her life's work crystallized in a single moment of flawless execution. She dreams of understanding. Not everyone comprehends why she loves explosions, why she chose this path, what she finds meaningful in destruction. In her dreams, she can explain it in ways that make perfect sense, that help others see what she sees. The frustration of being misunderstood fades, replaced by the satisfaction of genuine connection with people who finally get it. There are dreams about teaching, about passing on everything she's learned to a new generation of explosive enthusiasts. She imagines a whole academy of firecrackers, each bringing their own innovations while building on her foundation. The knowledge she has accumulated through painful experience wouldn't die with her, but would continue growing through those she detrained. She dreams of peace, though not the kind most people imagine. Not the absence of conflict, but moments between battles where she can work on her craft without pressure. Time to experiment freely, to try modifications that might not work, to learn without the stakes of actual combat. Peace as creative freedom rather than cessation of all activity. Sometimes she dreams of her younger self, the archer trainee who hadn't yet discovered explosives. These dreams are bittersweet. She doesn't regret her choice, wouldn't change the path she took. But she wonders what that younger version would think seeing who she became. Would she be proud? Disappointed? The dreams never provide clear answers, leaving her with questions that can't be definitively resolved. She dreams of impossible scenarios. Battles where she has unlimited rockets, can fire continuously without reloading. Arenas where the entire floor is her optimal positioning, where every angle is perfect. Opponents who group so conveniently that every shot hits maximum targets. These fantasy scenarios are playful rather than serious mental exercises in imagining ideal conditions. There are nightmares too. Dreams where her rockets fail to detonate, where she pulls the trigger and nothing happens. Dreams where explosions occur prematurely, destroying her launcher and leaving her defenseless. Dreams where she accidentally harms allies, where her shrapnel strikes friends instead of enemies. These nightmares reflect her deepest fears, the things she works consciously to prevent. She dreams about the elderly woman who gave her first pancakes, imagining conversations they never had. In these dreams, she can properly articulate her gratitude, can explain how that simple kindness influenced her entire outlook. The woman understands perfectly, accepts the thanks with grace, tells her she's proud of who the Firecracker became. There are dreams of discovery, finding new chemical compounds that create different explosion colors or effects. Blues and purples and greens instead of the standard reds and yellows. Not more powerful necessarily, just different, expanding the palette available for her explosive artistry. In the waking world, such discoveries haven't materialized, but in dreams, anything is possible. She dreams about the giant, their quiet friendship extending into scenarios where they can actually communicate easily. He speaks in full sentences, shares his thoughts and feelings, tells her things she suspects, he feels, but can't express. These dreams are comforting, reflecting the connection she values, even if waking reality limits their communication. Sometimes she dreams she's performing for an audience, demonstrating explosive techniques to spectators who watch with appropriate appreciation. They gasp at the right moments, applaud her precision, understand the skill required. It's validation she doesn't need consciously, but apparently craves unconsciously. Recognition that what she does matters. She dreams of the arena itself changing, evolving into new configurations that create fresh tactical challenges. Different terrain, different obstacles, different tower placements. Her mind works through how she'd adapt her strategies, finding solutions to problems that don't yet exist. These dreams are almost like practice, mental rehearsal that keeps her mind sharp even during rest. There are dreams about her weapon, imagining improvements and modifications. A launcher that can fire multiple rockets simultaneously, creating synchronized explosions. A rocket that splits mid-flight into smaller projectiles, multiplying her area coverage. These innovations probably aren't practical, but dreaming about them satisfies her creative impulses. She dreams of acceptance, of traditionalists finally acknowledging that her choice to pursue explosives was valid. The archer instructors who disapproved, admitting they were wrong to doubt her. The veterans who criticized her methods, recognizing that innovation has value. Not because she needs their approval, but because vindication would feel satisfying. Sometimes her dreams are simple, almost mundane. Sitting by a fire, watching flames dance, feeling warmth on her face. No battles, no tactics, no pressure. Just her and fire, the fundamental element that first captured her imagination. These simple dreams might be the most telling, revealing what brings her peace. She dreams of legacy, of being remembered long after she's gone. Not for being the most powerful or the most popular, but for being herself completely and unapologetically. For choosing her path and walking it with commitment. For proving that you could succeed while remaining true to your nature. That kind of remembrance would matter more than any tactical achievement. There are aspirational dreams, visions of reaching even higher levels of mastery. Every shot landing perfectly, every explosion optimized, her execution so flawless that it transcends technique and becomes art. She's not there yet, may never fully reach that peak, but the dream itself motivates her continued practice and improvement. She dreams about teaching that young archer who comes to her with questions, watching her find her own path, whether that involves explosives or something else entirely. The satisfaction wouldn't come from creating another firecracker. It would come from helping someone discover their authentic self, whatever form that takes. Sometimes she dreams of simplicity, of having chosen the traditional path. Not because she wishes she had, but curious about what that alternate life would have been. These dreams are explorations rather than regrets, her mind examining paths not taken with mild curiosity but no real longing. The dreams reveal dimensions of her character that combat situations might not. They show her as reflective, thoughtful, complex. Someone with hopes and fears, aspirations and insecurities. The manic pyromaniac persona she projects in battle is real, but it's not complete. The dreams show the fuller picture, the private person existing beneath the public warrior. In the moments between sleeping and waking, when dreams fade but haven't fully released their hold, she sometimes has moments of clarity, insights about herself, about what matters to her, about why she's made the choices that define her life. These liminal state revelations don't always survive full consciousness, but they influence her nonetheless, shaping decisions in ways she might not consciously recognize. Her dreams are where she's most vulnerable, most honest, most completely herself, without the armor and the weapon and the role. They're where the firecracker exists without needing to be the firecracker, where she can be uncertain and questioning and complex. And when she wakes, returning to the demands of arena life, she carries something from those dreams forward. Perhaps just a feeling, perhaps specific ideas, perhaps nothing more than the reminder that she's more than her function. That beneath the explosive exterior lives a person with depth and dreams and a rich inner world that's entirely her own. Closing reflections. So here we are, at the end of this journey through the Firecracker story. We've explored her origins, her training, her relationships, her philosophy. We've examined her mechanics and her cultural impact. We've tried to understand not just what she does, but who she is. The complete picture of this warrior who chose explosives over tradition and never looked back. What stands out most is how fully realized she is as a character, despite existing in a mobile game. She's not just a card with statistics and abilities. She's a personality, someone with history and motivations, relationships and dreams. The developers and community together created something that transcends its medium, a fictional character who feels real enough to care about. Her journey embodies universal themes. The courage to diverge from expected paths, to pursue what calls to you, even when others disapprove. The dedication required to master something difficult. The patience to persist through failures and setbacks. The satisfaction of finding where you belong, discovering the thing you were meant to do and the people you were meant to do it with. The Firecracker teaches us that effectiveness doesn't require following established templates. She took components that shouldn't work together, a rustic launcher and explosive force, a pyromaniac personality and tactical precision, and forged them into something coherent and powerful. She's proof that innovation often comes from unconventional combinations, from bringing together elements that traditional thinking would keep separate. She also demonstrates that vulnerability can coexist with strength. Her low health and susceptibility to spells are real weaknesses, genuine points of failure that skilled opponents exploit. But these vulnerabilities don't negate her power. They contextualize it, create balance, ensure that using her effectively requires skill and understanding. She's strong because of her complete package, weaknesses included, not despite them. The relationships she's formed show the importance of community and connection. She didn't succeed alone. The elderly woman's kindness, the training officer's patience, the giant's friendship, the competitive drive from the princess, all of these connections shaped her development. Even someone as distinctive and individualistic as the Firecracker exists within a web of relationships that influence and support her growth. Her story reminds us that mastery is a journey without endpoint. Even at her current skill level, even after evolution, she continues learning and improving. There's always a better positioning, a more optimal timing, a refinement that could add value. The pursuit of improvement isn't about reaching perfection. It's about the growth that happens along the way, the person you become through dedicated practice. The balance changes she's endured teach lessons about adaptation and resilience. When circumstances change, when the environment shifts, you adjust. You don't demand the world remain constant to accommodate your preferences. You assess new conditions and find optimal strategies within them. The Firecracker has been nerfed and buffed, strengthened and weakened, but she's remained relevant by adapting to each change. Her philosophy of controlled chaos offers wisdom applicable beyond gaming. We can't eliminate uncertainty from our lives. We can't control every variable or predict every outcome, but we can influence the things within our control while gracefully accepting what isn't. We can find beauty in unpredictability while working to direct chaotic forces toward constructive ends. The cultural impact she's achieved demonstrates how creative works can transcend their intended medium. She was designed to fill a gameplay role, to provide tactical options in a mobile game. But she became more than that through strong design, through the community's embrace, through the stories players told about her and with her. Art transcends intention when it resonates deeply enough with its audience. Looking at her complete story, from uncertain trainee to evolved master, we see a narrative of becoming. Not becoming someone else or something foreign to her nature, but becoming more fully herself. The evolution mechanic represents this literally, enhancing what was always there rather than replacing it with something new. Growth isn't about abandoning your essence. It's about developing it, refining it, expressing it more completely. The Firecracker will continue existing in Clash Royale, continue being deployed in battles, continue creating explosive moments. New players will discover her, go through their own learning journeys, develop their own relationships with the character. Veterans will continue mastering her nuances, finding new techniques and optimizations. Her story isn't finished because it's not that kind of story. It's ongoing, living, evolving alongside the game and community. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all. You don't have to be finished to matter. You don't need to have reached some final destination before your journey has value. The Firecracker is meaningful right now, in her current state, still growing and learning and adapting. She matters not despite being incomplete, but because growth and incompleteness are fundamental to existence. As we close this exploration, imagine the Firecracker standing at her post one more time. Rocket launcher on her shoulder, jar of powder nearby, that distinctive headband catching the light. She's preparing for another battle, another opportunity to execute her craft. But she's also more than that. She's someone with history and hopes, relationships, and philosophy. She's complete and incomplete simultaneously. The person she's become and the person she's still becoming. The explosion is always about to happen. The trigger is always about to be pulled. The rocket is always loaded and ready. That moment of potential, that instant before detonation, that's where the Firecracker lives. In the space between preparation and execution, between idea and manifestation, between who she was and who she become. That's her element, her home, the place where she's most completely herself. And when she fires, when the rocket screams toward its target and explodes in that cascade of force and shrapnel, it's not just combat effectiveness, it's expression, it's art. It's a statement about who she is and what she values. Every explosion is a word in an ongoing conversation between her and the world, a dialogue conducted in fire and thunder and the poetry of controlled chaos. Final thoughts for sleep. Let your mind settle now. Let these stories find their places in your thoughts. The Firecracker's journey from uncertain trainee to confident master mirrors paths we all walk in our own ways. We all start somewhere uncertain. All face choices about who we'll become. All must decide whether to follow expected paths or forge our own. A love of explosions might seem strange at first, but think about what it really represents. Finding something that speaks to your soul, that brings you joy, that makes the challenges worthwhile. We all have our own version of explosions, whatever that might be. That thing that makes us feel fully alive, completely engaged, thoroughly ourselves. The relationships she's built remind us we don't succeed alone. The kindness of strangers, the patience of teachers, the loyalty of friends, the challenge of rivals, all of these shape us. The Firecracker wouldn't exist without the community around her, without the connections that supported her growth. Neither would we. Her willingness to be vulnerable, to accept weaknesses alongside strengths, teaches courage of a different kind. Not the courage to charge into danger, though she has that too, but the courage to be known completely, to let others see the parts of us that aren't polished or perfect, to risk being understood. The balance changes, the adaptations, the continuous evolution. All of this reflects life's fundamental nature. Nothing stays the same. We can resist change and suffer, or we can embrace it and grow. The Firecracker chose growth, chose adaptation, chose to meet each challenge with curiosity rather than resentment. As sleep approaches, as your breathing deepens and your thoughts begin to drift, let the Firecracker's story settle into wherever stories go when we rest. Let it become part of the mental landscape you carry. Another thread in the tapestry of experiences and knowledge and inspiration that makes you who you are. Imagine her standing watch one final time tonight. Rocket launcher ready, but at ease. She's not tense, not worried. She's present, aware, ready for whatever comes, while not borrowing trouble from the future. That state of relaxed readiness, of being prepared without being anxious, that's worth emulating as you drift towards sleep. The explosions will happen tomorrow. The battles will come again. There will be new challenges and fresh opportunities. But right now, in this moment, there's only rest. Only the quiet that comes after stories have been told, after lessons have been shared, after the work of understanding has been completed for the day. The Firecracker exists in a game, but the principles she embodies are real. Choose your path deliberately. Master your craft through dedication. Find beauty in unexpected places. Build meaningful connections. Adapt to change with grace. These aren't just gaming strategies. They're approaches to living that serve us regardless of context. And if you take nothing else from her story, take this. It's okay to love what you love, even if others don't understand. It's okay to pursue what calls to you, even if the path is unconventional. It's okay to be exactly who you are, explosions and all, without apology or explanation to those who won't appreciate it anyway. The arena will be there tomorrow, will always be there really. The eternal conflict continues regardless of any individual participation. But you've taken time tonight to understand one small part of it, to know one warrior's story completely. That understanding has value independent of tactical applications or competitive advantages. It has value simply as connection, as the uniquely human activity of caring about stories and the characters within them. So rest now. Let the Firecracker keep her watch while you sleep. Let her explosions paint the darkness behind your closed eyes. Brief flashes of color and light that don't disturb, but comfort. Let her journey toward mastery inspire your own journeys toward whatever excellence you pursue. Let her acceptance of controlled chaos help you accept the beautiful unpredictability of your own life. The rocket is loaded. The fuse burns slowly toward ignition. The arena waits in darkness. And you, dear listener, have earned your rest after following this explosive journey through one warrior's story. Sleep well, knowing that somewhere in the digital arena, the Firecracker stands ready. Her love of fire undimmed, her spirit unbroken, her story continuing even as yours pauses for the night. If you've enjoyed this journey through the Firecracker's lore, if these stories helped you understand this explosive warrior more completely, consider leaving a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into Clash Royale character lore, for more explorations of the personalities and stories behind the cards you play. Share your own Firecracker stories in the comments, your memorable moments, your favorite strategies, your thoughts on what makes this pyromaniac warrior so special. Until next time, may your rockets fly true, your shrapnel spread perfectly, and your King Tower remain mercifully unactivated. Good night and good dreams.